Isabel, say hello to all the lovely people out there who haven't seen you for a little while.
Hello. I don't actually
So,
know how long it's been since you've uploaded something with me in it, because those aren't the same things.
no, we record stuff way ahead of time. I was just explaining to Isabel that I have videos recorded and set to come out in February. Luckily, this is not one of them. But James Cameron, we got, of course, Avatar, True Lies, Titanic, The Terminator, The Abyss, Aliens, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. But we're here to talk about Piranha 2, The Spawning. What are your thoughts on Piranha 2, The Spawning?
It's the only one I didn't watch.
I'm kidding. We're here to talk about James Cameron as a whole. James Cameron is I have so much affection for James Cameron. I love his films. Every film he makes is a sort of event, even Piranha 2, arguably. James Cameron also makes movies that are only for very hot people, and we're the two hottest ones, and that's what you got. We're going to explore the cinema of James Cameron. I think let's just start at two superficial places because we're going to talk for a little while. We're going to hit some good points. It's going to be sporadic and sprawling. I would watch out for spoilers, but maybe not. But the thing is, with James Cameron spoilers, these are a handful of the most popular and successful films ever made.
I
So
was
I'm not
gonna
really
say
worried.
most of
Yeah,
the noteworthy twists or whatnot have been like so embedded in pop culture.
it's very true. But I think off the bat, let's just lay down our favorite James Cameron and our least favorite, and then we'll work from there through tangents to find some common ideas about the themes and the composition of his work. You go first.
Okay. My first is always a hard one for me. I actually always say that Jim is like the most unrankable director because his favorite is usually whatever I watch most recently. I would say I think his most James Cameron and like his kind of definitive statements of his like career project are Titanic and Avatar. But the ones I'm most personally attached to are probably Aliens and T2, just because
Fair
particularly
enough.
Aliens, which is funny because Aliens is really in the end probably one of his least interesting movies, but it's the one I watched the most as a teenager. So I'm very, very fond of it. It was very formative for me. But Avatar and Titanic are the ones that like I think a lot about a lot, but T2 and Aliens are the ones I'm just like always
No, for
watching.
real. Which one can you live without?
I would pick Aliens.
No, I mean least
Oh, for
favorite.
least favorite, like which would
Yeah.
I? Oh, a week ago I would have said True Lies. Honestly, now I would say The Abyss.
I was wondering because you were posting about watching that today and that it
Ah,
was pretty, but you didn't know if you liked it.
I watched The Abyss years ago, and I was pretty into it. It's kind of like the prologue to Titanic in that it's basically like a big scale experiment where the plot doesn't actually matter. It's more about the technology and like his own fetish for deep sea diving. Uh,
Yeah.
I watched it again today and I wasn't as into it. There's like nothing
Reminds me of a
technically wrong with it, but
reminds me of a conversation we had like a month or two ago. In fact, and the only conversation we've ever had that wasn't recorded for YouTube. We did bring up James Cameron and talking about like it's very difficult. It reminds me of something you would say about fuck. You say this about a filmmaker all the time, probably John Carpenter, but there's a more specific one that we've talked about together where you're like the surface is very easy to. He said this about ginger snaps even. Like the surface is very easy to pick up, and even like the first layer underneath the surface of like that first metaphorical layer. But with James Cameron, it's like I don't actually know exactly what the impetus for making these films are about, right? Like The Abyss, yeah,
yeah.
his fetish for deep sea diving, like what is the film about? We were talking and I was like, I don't know. Like I would love to talk about film with George Lucas or Steven Spielberg, but if I ever got an opportunity to talk to James Cameron, I don't think I'd want to talk about cinema because a part of me doesn't think he's very interested in cinema
Yeah,
personally.
I
Like
agree.
yeah, it's
Like
very strange.
like I like Avatar is like a movie I've watched several times. I'm probably gonna watch it again soon because they're showing it again in theaters. And I think it's like a fucking technical marvel. I have absolutely nothing at all to say about it on the level of like images or like editing or like
Yeah,
montage. The interest is purely like what's like within the text. So it's very weird. It's like not to say he's like a shoddy filmmaker because he's like very competent, like extremely kind of classical in a way that like he kind of fits more like invisible editing styles, I think, better than most people. I think I
yeah,
mentioned this on that conversation that I feel like he's the opposite of Spielberg because Spielberg is like the most like libidinal Hollywood filmmaker in that like Spielberg operates almost purely on like id, on his
yes.
id. It to the point that like his movies just like come off bizarre and fractured and they don't really follow a coherent thematic, narrative, emotional, anything logic. And that kind of makes him interesting and kind of schizophrenic. James is like overwhelmingly logical and kind of utilitarian a lot of the time. Even in something like Titanic, which is very indebted to kind of sweeping, you know, like David Lean historical epics and such, it feels very machinic almost like even the movement of like the romance in Titanic feels like watching like the moving parts of a machine.
Yeah, I do know that
It-
early drafts of his screenplay for Titanic, were very detailed in like the action of the piece and the idea of the ship going down and the movements, but all of the dialogue that involved the love story was just like he'll write it later. Like he wasn't too interested in
yeah,
the actual, but he knew it had to happen, and that was it was the most integral part of the whole piece. But he wasn't invested in it, and yet it's still
yeah.
pulled off fully. Like when I think of Spielberg, I think of like a really warped like pupil, like probably the greatest pupil that Frank Capra ever had. So I think that like the ethics are translated easily into Spielbergian concepts, whereas Cameron, I'm looking at a list of his movies here, and sure, there are like concepts of found family and a little bit of class disparity in like Titanic, but he's not interested in these like Capra-esque themes, really. And
Yeah.
yet he's one of the biggest like self-proclaimed populist filmmakers ever.
Mhm.
Well, we'll get into like the ethics, the driving impulses behind these movies, and probably he actually doesn't have too many, so we can actually go like quickly or spend some
Yeah,
time
it's
movie
actually
by
fairly
movie.
easy.
But my favorite James Cameron movie is Titanic, and definitely by a significant margin too. Love that film. I love that film to death, to pieces. I think my least favorite, I'm not gonna say Piranha 2, that's really boring. Um, I'm going to say True Lies. It isn't to say that it's bad. It's just
Yeah.
like
I saw it
it's
recently for the first time. It was like my one last like big blind spot in
just
Cameron.
weird for me. We'll go into it when we get through the list here. But starting in 1982 is Piranha 2. There's really not much to say. This is how he got his foot in the door, right? But we've talked about how Cameron worked under Carpenter before, like for Escape from New York as a set designer or something like that. So y- yeah, this is we're skipping Piranha 2. There's nothing to say. What do you want
I
us
was
to
gonna
say?
say I haven't seen it, so I just have to go off your word about
The
what it
Terminator,
entails.
1984.
The debut film from James Cameron.
I mean, if you ask him, I think he might say that's his
He would
debut.
probably agree. Yeah.
But The Terminator, 1984, the first signs of Cameron, and also one of the most important like cultural touchstones in popular 80s cinema for sure. These characters are massive. It's a pretty dark kind of film. It's more similar to a horror film, in my opinion. Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank God James Cameron came around because no one's used him better than James Cameron. And that's not necessarily be like you know, being mean to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you know, he does lack a few emotional components to his characterization, and it comes in perfectly in the Terminator and in Terminator 2. Linda Hamilton is amazing. We'll talk about her being amazing later because she's not too amazing in this film. Who is though is Michael Bean, Michael Bain,
Yeah.
Michael Bean.
We
How do
never
you
know what
say
to
his
call him because he came up in our Cherry Falls.
who like and also Bill Paxton is in this movie for a brief moment, and those two
And my
dudes have to
favorite part of
be
the movie, Bill
those two
Paxton
dudes
kills
must
the
be
whole
James
thing.
Cameron's like favorite people, I think, is Bill Paxton and Michael Biehn, because no one's given more chances to those two actors than James has. And Bill
And
Paxton,
Bill was the only one that took those chances. Michael Bean kind of gave up after a while.
oh
Bill
my
was
God,
ride or
but
die.
yeah, the Terminator is great. What do you think of the Terminator?
Oh, that was an early one I watched for obvious reasons, like most people under the age of 18. So
Mm.
yeah, I've always had a big soft spot for Terminator. I probably prefer the second one. Although for a long time I alternated between liking the first and second. It's kind of like the it's actually very, very similar to the difference between like Alien and Aliens in that like the first one just has this lived in quality that is incredibly, extremely atmospheric and that I love very much. Like it's an incredibly aesthetically pleasing film, whereas the second one is just pure, action
No,
craftsmanship.
the second one's
But
a perfect movie. This
yeah.
I've always preferred number two over it way more because I the only the only movies that I rewatched for this was Terminator 2 and Titanic.
Mhm.
I just watched Terminator 2 earlier today, first time in a while. It's a perfect film. It's completely perfect. The Terminator 1 is good, but it does to me, it does feel like a debut. I think there are a lot of spaces where James Cameron is still learning. I think he's still completely learning during that film.
It's the kind of thing, or sorry, go ahead.
I think that he's trying to do an awful lot with that film, but like, is James Cameron actually wary of the singularity of machine learning? Like, does he actually care? Like, I don't know what the
No,
actual impetus of the Terminator is. Like, I don't know why. It works
he
on
loves
every level that it
technology too
attempts.
much. He
Right?
loves
I mean,
technology
every
too much. He's like fucking Andy Warhol. He's like, if you could plug my brain into a Dell computer, I'd say sign me the fuck up. Like,
he loves it so much that like Avatar was put on hold so that technology could catch up with him, right? Like, I don't
yeah.
understand. It's great. You have these statements, of course, no fate but what we make, and it's like the simplest statement that an audience could possibly hear and latch on to. Uh, and Cameron just does he think people are dumb? I don't know. I don't know. I'm being like,
No, but I think he's entirely indifferent to the
I do too. That's why I like Terminator
yeah
2 more, because there is a lot of a genuine affection, I feel like, in that movie. And
yeah
like the stuff that James Cameron finds both humorous and the things he finds that are killable offenses are both completely shocking to me.
yeah
Like, I like in
you know
T2, like his foster parents aren't like bad people, but James Cameron is like, but we want to see them get massacred. It's fine. Like, they're just like aggravated and not great.
yeah that I feel like this is a little soon for me to get into it, but I do have a lot of feelings about what I perceive as the consistency across like his ideology and his view of the world throughout the films. But in Terminator 1, it's kind of just bare essentials.
That's what
It's
I
very much,
mean. Yeah.
but it's interesting because it's like for James Cameron, you watch it and you're like, this is kind of rudimentary. As someone who like watches a lot of and has seen a lot of like exploitation films and films
Mhm.
in the kind of realm that Terminator 1 was very much a part of like B movies genre cinema from the 80s. Terminator is so obviously like, even if you watch the shittiest version of it, like a VHS rip at like 140p, it's so obviously more technically proficient than what a lot of other people were doing. So it's like for
That's
the
why
standard that he set for himself, it's kind of near the bottom, but for anyone else, it's clear he's talented.
that's why I tried to mention Carpenter earlier, because like
Mm-hmm.
if he worked with him for a few films, I do see some of that, some of the lessons in Terminator 1. I do.
Yeah, it does feel lean in the way that something like Assault on Precinct 13 is. It's
And even
very
in the idea of like not necessarily Lovecraftian, but in like a Michael Myers villain that you can't really like emotionally invest
yeah.
your time in because it's a trap, it's a setup. Like you can't emotionally invest in the Terminator or else. But then like by Terminator 2, he completely shifts on that and is like,
Yeah.
no, you can actually. But we'll get to that soon. First, we should probably trigger everyone in the audience because I think that we both believe that Aliens from 1986 is better than the first Alien.
No.
What?
But I love
What? No,
Aliens.
you've said this. You've said these words to me.
I I love Aliens to pieces, to the moon and back, but I probably prefer Alien. But they're like borderline equal to me. Like they're basically like throughout my life I've wrestled and gone back and forth.
It sucks that this was your last video on the channel. That's crazy.
This was
You've
actually a
no,
video
you
about
have
why
you've told me that Aliens is better than Alien. Now I'm just
uh
alone. Now
I
I'm
was
like cocky and
gaslighting you.
arrogant and alone.
This is actually a video about why Ridley Scott is the great auteur of
He's Ridley Scott is actually the older I get, the worse Ridley Scott's movies age. And I'm not afraid of saying that
but
at all.
um
Aliens is
to
great. I
yeah,
don't
to
even go back
backpedal.
and watch the first one. All I do is watch Aliens and Alien Resurrection and call it a day.
I've
I've done it.
Alien is a strong contender for the movie I've watched the most times. I've literally watched it like multiple times within a week, which is something I don't really do. But
Watched Aliens
Aliens,
multiple times. Aliens is
yeah,
perfect.
no,
It's a
Aliens
perfect
I've seen a
sequel.
million times. The last time I saw it, I actually watched a scan of like a film print, which was very
I like to
cool.
say
It
that he
looked very
grew a
pretty.
lot. He grew a lot in 2 years. Aliens is like,
For the longest time, I in my memory, I thought of Aliens as like surely like a few movies in for him.
no.
Um, it
I
feels
would
like
think that
it.
the Abyss came before this, like when we're coming to like how to structure and
Yeah,
how to compose.
yeah, I agree. Because and like I said, Aliens, catch me on the right day. It's my favorite James Cameron movie. I don't really know what to say about its text because, as I think is common with a lot
Wait,
of the
so
early,
Ridley Scott's third best movie is better than your favorite James Cameron movie. This is stupid.
yeah,
No. I'm not letting
yeah.
you say these things.
We'll get back to it. But well, it's a topic for another video when you do
I'm
your
James Cameron's
Ridley.
proudest foot soldier here, okay? But Ridley, who? Who the
But
fuck are you talking about?
Aliens is a movie where I'm just enamored with the aesthetics of it. I mean, I'm enamored with its visual style, the style of the base. I forget what the LV-426. I'm just enamored with everything about the way it looks. It was something that it was one of those things that as a teenager, you know, when I become really attached to things, like I really wanted to play a proper fucking video game set in this world and stuff
The
like that. Like, I don't know, it
Colonial
just
Marines didn't do it for you.
no, unfortunately. I was really excited for
Legendary
that too
game.
at the time. I was young teenager at the time.
Well, at
But
least Michael Biehn reprised his role for the video
yeah, that
game.
really did a lot to sell me. I was like fucking Michael Bean came back. But I don't know. It's just one of the it's just like a fucking the same thing as T1 but better. Like a just like a fucking lean mean genre picture that kind of
I
just
think
hits
it's a lot
everything at
more
the right moment.
sophisticated than that. I wouldn't say it's more sophisticated than Alien 1, but since it's a sequel, he gets to carry over that metaphorical language without putting in any of the effort. So it's
I
like
would
there.
Yeah, I would say
But
at least that it's like formally sophisticated, like it's extremely
I would say it's
sophisticated.
probably one of the most once I think this is one of he's made a lot of most important films. This is one of his first most important films
Yeah.
because when he gets to make a sequel, and also I think he gets to grow from the Terminator 1, like James Cameron's idea of of a female protagonist is definitely not a defenseless woman. That's not what he's interested in. And
Yeah.
Ripley is this is the Ripley I think about. I don't think about her like running afraid of her own shadow in the first film. I think of her in this one. What is going on? My computer just did something. Weird. Oh, it
I heard you
finished
fine.
downloading the first one. Whatever. Okay. It's not interested in Sigourney and Ripley just running around like aimlessly and afraid and scared. Uh,
Mhm.
we get like, get away from her, you bitch. We get something for mass audiences to latch on to that is entirely in my opinion like empowering women and also
Yeah,
like
no, I
I think
agree.
I think genuinely, because I don't know, like I said, I don't know if he's interested in films. I don't know if he's interested in cinema, but he's definitely cognizant and loves to play with the effects that cinema can have on groups of people. And he
Hmm.
probably learned that from working on horror and action films. Like I like to see them
Hmm.
jump and I like to see them like with their mouths open agape. And
Hmm.
now he's saying that I like to see them change like culturally. Like I like to
Hmm.
see them be moved into another kind of archetypal direction with this stuff.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's like lean and mean. In fact, isn't it like it's like over 2 hours long? I think it's got a lot of
Yeah.
like a huge ensemble. Some of them are more deep than others. Bill Paxton will always be my favorite for the Game Over man. Like he's
Game
amazing.
over,
But
man.
Ripley is very interesting, and for a consistent theme of family, uh, this is at least
Yeah,
carried over from Terminator for sure.
this
The
is
lengths
like
that a mother will go through for her child.
this is like the in my opinion, the only time he is like in favor of the family completely, because I feel like Terminator 2 is pretty damning. I
I think
think
he's
he's
in
gonna bring
favor
that
of it.
back. I think we'll get to it, but I think Avatar 2 is gonna bring it back because the trailer seemed to imply that. But yeah, Aliens is like where he kind of mastered and controlled the fucking blockbuster. I think
Yeah.
it's really just, and again, it's one of those things where I'm like, I, I don't know how to explain it other than like even for someone like Spielberg, where like who again, I'm sorry, I just think he's like a really good analog because of the way he contrasts with James Cameron. Like Spielberg has images that are like sometimes completely just vacuous or stupid, but and images that are really complicated. But both ends of that spectrum still like interest me, if that makes sense. Like there's Spielberg images that are completely stupid, but they still like interest me and fascinate me. And like the image that never happens in Aliens, but like events stick in my memory very strongly, or like sequences stick in my memory
Well,
very strongly. Like I'm thinking,
set design and set pieces for me, like the reveal of the alien queen, like that
yeah,
is a moment I'll never forget.
yeah, exactly. And I also think of like just sequences of like shots, and insofar as like the shot of like when they first encounter the xenomorphs and then they run back to the truck, and I think it's Michael Bean, but I might be wrong, who like I think he like shoves the shotgun in the xenomorph's mouth or some shit and blows it up, or
Yeah.
someone does.
Oh
um
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that the only time that the film is truly like doing like horror style things in a way that's effective is maybe ahead of its time too, and it's almost found footagey where because Ripley's
yeah,
not there when they first are there, and then she's watching on all of their like camera
it's
on
so
then their
good.
helmets. Yeah, and that's
It's
actually
so
pretty
beautiful.
terrifying and ahead of its time for a found footage kind of segment of this film. It works really well.
It's maybe the first instance of like him, what would to me like really define his work as being like high concept. Like it's the concept of a sequence most of the time, more than so like
Oh yeah,
I
this
guess
is
the
definitely a movie
cells
made
of
up of
shot to shot,
sequences. I think of this movie definitely in sequences too. I like that you brought that up.
compared to like
Um,
say like the depth of I don't know, like fucking Battleship Potemkin is from a shot to a shot, and James Cameron it's from a sequence to a sequence and how they interconnect. And I just find that really interesting. Like I don't remember specific shots, but I remember specific events occurring in a way that's very vivid for me.
because
Um,
James Cameron is like demonstrating that he understands the mechanisms of blockbuster narratives like perfectly
yeah,
well. And like he hits every single mark. Like I'm so sorry for forgetting the characters, but the like the Latina
Vasquez.
Vasquez, thank you, and the bald guy who sucks.
Hey Vasquez, has anyone ever mistaken you for a man?
Hope anyone ever did it to you? Something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or have you ever been mistaken for a man? No, have you?
Yeah. But her death with the guy with the bald head who sucks, who like they like in their moments of death, like find like respect in each other while they blow
Yeah,
each other up, like killing
yeah.
like Cameron, I don't he does
Really
he
gets the
care about
camaraderie
any
point.
he likes
Well,
the
this is
camaraderie, but does he care about any of them actually? But he does like fit the mold. He doesn't make these characters super likable, but he knows that if you give it a certain kind of framing, if you apply it to a certain situation, then it's going to be pathos no matter what. It's like scientific, you know?
I, I put this a lot in James Cameron down to him. I partly credited him, but mostly insofar as like I think he knows what actors to pick for the part. Because I think he knows that like Sigourney Weaver obviously is an incredibly magnetic actress, like
Well, he also
incredibly.
didn't really have a choice.
Yeah, but
Like
also just in general, and I think the actors that are like Bill Paxton, Michael Biehn,
Michael Biehn, great, and Newt, perfect, like perfect casting for these.
I think a lot of it really is the actors bringing something to the table and realizing like Jim's game and like what he cares about, and they kind of bring their all. And I think it just they work on the same wavelength in a way that is interesting compared to like um Titanic, where I think he has a very different relationship to the actors in that movie. It's kind of almost more he's using them in that movie, if that makes sense. Like I kind of
Yes.
feel the
Well,
sense that DiCaprio and Winslet are being used like models, whereas in
yeah.
this it feels more like Sigourney Weaver taking an artistic position. Um,
Honestly, and where I think that it improves on the like metaphorical language of Alien One, which could like arguably be at least in part about the fear of male rape, like
yeah,
applying that to the most machismo, ultra
yeah,
masculine group of people you can think of being
yeah,
space marines, then that language is just amplified tenfold, and these men are even more terrified because
yeah.
it's like the
It
most emasculating thing that can happen to you, and it's
and it's
boom.
funny that happened that year because I might be wrong, but I think it was like a year before Predator was released, which does kind of the same thing of like, what if the
My
military
favorite
colonizing force becomes colonized,
the
you
fun
know?
thing about Predator is that the guy who was creating the creature was on an airplane next to James Cameron, and like he almost finished it, and according to the story, Cameron looked at it and went, have some mandibles on it. And that was the end. Basically, James Cameron invented the
Invented
Predator as well.
Predator, but they are similar movies, I think, thematically, but Aliens has a bit more
They
heart.
are.
But I say Predator is one of my favorite movies, but like Aliens, I think has more heart to it because you get
They are, but
again
I think
Weaver
there's
and
something more there's something like more
Sinister.
lethal to that masculine dogma where like a
Yeah,
woman is who's going to save you from this. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not going to be Arnie, it's not going to be the one of you who's practical. It's going to be a woman. You can't help yourself. I don't want to leave Aliens without mentioning that it's why I love Lance Henriksen as much as I do. Bishop is
Yeah,
probably my favorite character in all of the Alien movies. Bishop is great. I love Bishop
Bishop's
to death.
fantastic.
Incredible performance, great character, and Cameron knew how to structure him. Like if you watch, like Bishop is he's in the movie for like 15 to 20 minutes tops, and he does survive, but like it's so interesting because we're getting to see him play around with robots, with synthetics, directly after the Terminator, and Bishop is probably the most affectionate android that is in the Wayland Yutani universe,
Hmm.
and it's completely different from Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's completely different from whatever concept I think we had of. Once again, I don't know if Cameron gives a fuck about technology.
Yeah,
But
I
maybe Bishop is
oh, I
closest to how he
mean, I
actually
think he gives a
perceives
fuck
it.
about technology. I think it's the only thing he gives a fuck
I
about. But
mean, like whether or not it's
oh,
whether or not we
like
should
it's a
be
good or
fearful of
bad.
machine learning. Yeah, like
No, he's like Christopher Nolan. He's just like, yeah, send me the fuck into space. Let the planet blow up. I don't get. The
the
last thing
thing
I would
about
say. Or
Yeah,
go
like
ahead, go
Nolan
ahead.
and him are both like pretty or pretty logical, it feels to me. But Cameron never feels cold. It's like he understands the
Yeah.
movement so well that he knows that in order for it to work, like you said with models, you have to have people who can emote those, like you have to be, it's crazy.
I
James
think it's
Cameron's a
that
crazy filmmaker.
I think it's that the only thing on earth he identifies like an erotic quality in is like technology. Like,
Technology, and he is hella he is attracted to these fucking girl boss dream
well,
girls. He
yeah,
really,
I was
really
gonna
is.
say, because Ripley is one of the first
I just
characters I
finished
ever fucking
T2 and
loved.
he is in love with Linda Hamilton. I just
Yeah,
finished T2. He loves her. Okay. Like in
yeah,
True Lies, Jamie Lee Curtis, like he loves these kinds of women. He really does.
but
Which is fine, which is cool for the dichotomy of Hollywood. Sure. Fine.
mhm.
Go for it.
There,
But
yeah, there is this kind of like, yeah, this is maybe actually I hadn't thought of this, but like the first instance of like all of the core ideas throughout James Cameron's work are completely contradictory most of the time. You know, like the main one being like he's both like a radical and an uber capitalist. But I think this is the first like instance of it where like he is both like super in love with these images of like strong women. And I think like again, like Ripley was like incredible. The way he specifically, more so than Ridley, depicted Ripley was incredibly formative for me at an age where I was going through shit. And you know, like Ripley like was very important to me and
Ripley
still is.
derived
But
eroticism from Sigourney Weaver out of her defenselessness. Like she's most
yeah,
attractive when she's like half naked at the end of the movie, like shaking and scared. So fuck you, Ridley Scott. Okay.
actually, I found out recently that was mostly Sigourney Weaver. She said she refused to pull her underwear up, but and they were begging her to, or something to that effect.
James
Anyway,
Cameron would never have even asked.
he never would have asked. He would have said, keep it on, keep it like that. But then you have obviously like, and we'll get to it, but like the more complicated and kind of thorny, I think, gender dynamics of The Abyss and True Lies, which are almost completely at odds with what he shows us and tells us in Aliens and T2. Um, and I don't entirely know what to do with it. I don't think he entirely cares if I do or not,
Right.
but I don't think he cares what I think he thinks about women. I just know that he seems to have like very kind of
Well, we're gonna talk about the
complicated.
Abyss next, but the
Yeah,
Mary Elizabeth Mastron, hella Italian last name, is definitely my favorite character from the Abyss. But Aliens,
yeah.
a few more things we should definitely say about it.
Oh,
Like,
100%. I want to keep on. I love this fucking movie. I could
yeah, I love it
watch it
too.
to death. I think I have
And
the entire screenplay memorized
and
at
and
times. Like,
and just to spare me the comment, we know the legendary story of what James Cameron pitching this with a dollar sign for the
yeah, the
S,
dollar
right?
sign.
So what do we make of Paul Reiser in this movie then?
Which was his character? I don't know the
He
actor
was
by
the
name.
actual like Wayland Utani guy who was there.
Oh, what's his fucking name?
I'm not good
It's
with
on the tip
names
of
for
my tongue.
this.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm having a moment. I'm having a moment. I know it. I'm just neglecting to say it off the top of my
Well,
head.
he's the dirty, filthy capitalist, but clearly this movie was made with
Burke.
capitalistic
It's Burke.
Burke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh,
what do I make of his villainy?
uh, I don't. This is the point on which I
I thought you were
think.
about to hit this point when you were talking about like blatant contradictions
Oh
within his work,
yeah,
things
I
that
mean,
don't
like I
make
was gonna
sense.
say, like Scott's version, I think is a little more nuanced when it comes to this, because like Scott, I feel like a large part of it is about like blue collar workers exploited. But the
True, but
in
Paul
this, it's kind
Reiser
of
is
more.
exploiting like stupid young men who join the army.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is more of like a Hollywood where it's like they really, I think, like lean on it as a core theme of the text in a way that's like kind of hard to miss, but I still think is very compelling. And actually, that becomes like a big thing with Cameron. I think is that like he's like he really shoves it in your face, but then is also like that's not really what the movie's about. But in this case, I agree. I agree. I really like it. It's interesting though because again, the yeah, Cameron throughout his work constantly depicts like just evil capitalists, right? And a lot of his movies are also like extremely critical of the military. Obviously, this is the first instance of that because in Aliens, you know, they're all like they're lovable, but they're also like jarheads, and they're kind of being used by a corporation basically. And then this all culminates in Avatar, where the finale is we're gonna slaughter the Marines, and Americans across the country said yay. But it, he's like uber rich, and also he is notoriously a monster on set. James Cameron, like James Cameron is this guy who has infinite money and uses infinite money to fuel projects that are incredibly time consuming, money consuming, occasionally life endangering, purely because he feels like it and because he saw it in a dream once, and no one can tell him no because he's James fucking Cameron and he has
As
infinite
he should.
money.
Yes.
And that this is the contradiction though, is that like we'll get into it more on the Abyss, but like the Abyss is like one of the most nightmarish shoots in like film history. Ed Harris, I think, almost died multiple times. Everyone was miserable. After that shoot, no one ever wanted to see James Cameron's face ever again. And then, but then he'll make a movie where it's like, you know who really needs to get it? The fucking businessmen, those greedy fuckers. And it's,
Oh
I
shit.
really think he believes both. I really think he just doesn't care enough to, I think he's self-aware. I just think he doesn't care. I think
No, so
he's
like who, like James Cameron, like who is, he's a filmmaker, yes, but like who is he really? Like what does he really think he's doing?
I don't know. You know, like you watch Schindler's List, and there's this like really thorny quality of like how obviously Spielberg relates to Schindler and how Spielberg is fucked up.
James
What
Cameron would
does
make it better.
James Cameron says? You're like, James Cameron, aren't you also a greedy evil capitalist? And he says, so?
Yeah,
Not
so
my fucking
it's like
problem.
he
Like, why
understands
do
the
I fucking
movement so
care?
well. Like what, it's not like provocateur. Is there even a
No.
name? Is there even a name for someone who likes to just change the world like all the time? Because that's what he seems to like to do. He likes to see his work affect culture.
Yeah,
That's what he does.
he's
And like movies was the
I
loudest way of doing that. Like if he could
I'm
make
tempted to
Avatar a world that you could, well, I live in Florida. He made Avatar world down here. I think that's what he wants to do. It's like,
like I'm tempted to call him just like an aesthete in like the very traditional sense of the word, but he's not even that. He's too kind of compelled by this kind of work ethic mentality
well,
that like I'm
like
like,
does Hideo Kojima want to make video games? Like what does he think he's
no.
making?
Yeah, it's even easier, I feel like, to parse Kojima. I have
That is, but
watched
like that's the first one I can think of like you're brilliant at this, but are you are you do, if you wanted to make
I
a film, you could. So you're making this deliberately. Like, what are you doing?
the way I think about it is like I have been molded and influenced by the work of James Cameron since I was at least like what 13, 14 or
Yeah.
something. And I've watched each of those movies several times over the years. I don't know what he is as a
I've
person.
been like irreparably like influenced by him, and I think in positive ways. Like that's the wild shit. I mean, the
Yeah,
first time I was ever exposed to female eroticism was on Titanic when I was 7. Like this man was not only my sexual awakening, but also my introduction to not believing police, my introduction to how corporations will use military factions, like all of these things, and
he
none of
is
those things
like
are bad.
he is perfectly cognizant of those things, but he is probably aware of his own complicity in those things, but he kind of just doesn't care if you hate him for it because he doesn't really care what you think about him. He's just a guy with infinite power, so he's like, I'm gonna make stuff about this. I'm not gonna do anything else about it, but I know it's happening. Balls
I
in
don't
your
know.
fucking court now.
Like
Like,
I'm for real. I would not talk to him about movies. I would talk to
yeah,
Catherine Bigelow about movies. I feel like she likes them and likes to make them and wants to make them. James wants to live under the sea. Like I don't know what the fuck he wants to do, but we're going
he
to 1989 now for The Abyss.
Yeah,
But
like I said, I, I liked it less than I did the first time watching it
it's
again today for
not
the
too
first time in
great.
20 years.
Its
It's good.
scarcity on physical media makes it, I think, more loved in our time because you can't really find it too easily. Um,
Yeah.
but
It's weird
it's
though
good.
because it's like it's an important like shifting point in basically a million different ways
Hmm.
for Cameron. It's his first properly like front to back conceptual film. Like film
I
where it's
do think
like
it's his
there
most like hokey film, ultimately. I think it's like
I
pretty like saccharine, kind of.
I agree, but I think that's because he didn't really know how to get at what he wanted to get at yet. Because this is, I think, when he finally is willing to make a movie where he is weaponizing like film grammar and like story grammar purely to get at to the stuff he actually cares about. And he doesn't really know how else to do that than just like, I guess there's like a marriage plot line, I guess. And he kind of just
Yeah.
implements it in like the most sentimental, hokey way possible. But it's not so obviously not what he cares about.
But
And I
that's
think
the
he
part that
streamlines
I
that in
care about.
Titanic.
That's the
Not
part that he
me.
knows
I
the,
don't know.
but no, that's the part he knows an audience will care about. The most intense part of the film forever is I'll just say it's probably the most intense scene he ever filmed with, I have her name here, so I can't butcher it too bad. Mary
When she's
Elizabeth Monstrantonio. Yeah, when she's like drowned and
yeah,
like he's trying to save her, but it goes on for like an additional minute and a half where like, oh, she is dead. Okay. And Ed Harris is jumping through these hoops of acting that he doesn't normally get asked to perform. And it's such an intense moment. And it's a moment that doesn't really involve too many different moving objects or moving parts. Cameron can do
mhm,
this isolated thing. And it's through getting you so scared in the moment of that deathly pathos that I'm sold on the marriage for the rest of the film because my heart dropped when I thought she was dead, whether or not I cared about their union
yeah.
before. I do care now. And Michael Bean, this is the last time that Cameron threw him a bone and he completely just didn't know what to do with it.
They should have given that to Bill Paxton.
He would have been so much better. Oh my God.
But
But I
I don't
agree
know.
with you ultimately. Like it's his most contrived film for sure.
It's
And the idea that it feels contrived. And the
it
idea
it is
that
very or go ahead, sorry.
oh, there's just in the idea that it feels, like you said, like an excuse for James Cameron to, I don't know, get the audience to think that um
Diving is
invest a lot of their
cool.
time in deep sea exploration. Like there could be like the secrets of the universe there. You know, he has that's why I think he does think audiences can be very dumb. Because if he tells us that fucking ancient Atlanteans or whatever, these weird alien beings are down there to enlighten us, like, oh well, maybe I should pay attention to more deep sea exploration, maybe invest some of my dollars in it.
Exploration.
You know,
I this is the I guess the best way to think about it is like is the first part of a trilogy that makes up the Abyss, Titanic, and Avatar, where he becomes increasingly proficient at just like using familiar narratives or compelling enough narratives to get at what he really cares about. But obviously he succeeded much better with Titanic and Avatar because those are like the two fucking highest grossing movies of all time. People
maybe
have
the Abyss is so
it says a
worrisome because I feel like it's really easy to tell the impetus behind making this one. And
yes,
it's just not as
100%.
interesting. It's just not as interesting when you boil it down. Like I don't share
100%.
his interests there. Like you said, it's beautiful. I mean, it looks really
It
nice and it
looks
is really well
it
put together. And it's a
as a
huge,
work of craftsmanship. It's
yeah. And it marks a
no
huge movement
complaints.
arc within James Cameron's own writing. I do like the marriage, and I feel like that's the only consistent thing we can carry over from the Terminator up to here is like this these two seemingly doomed couple, like a seemingly doomed couple in an unwinnable situation. Um,
I I'm mostly into it insofar as this is like the very first instance, and we kind of abandoned this with Terminator 2 only to come back to it later, but the first instance of him saying maybe it doesn't have to be about the story. Maybe
yeah,
movies don't need a story. Maybe I can just do whatever the fuck I want. And if I put the ghost of a story, I can get at the themes I really care about. At which point, like, just fucking become Stan Brakhage. But of course, he didn't do that. He wanted to make money, so he said, "I'm gonna put a romance in." But it is interesting in that way, and that this is where it becomes really obvious that like, man, he really doesn't care about telling a story at all.
No,
He
no.
he cares about technology. He's that guy in film school who masturbates to cameras, you know,
Yeah,
and like
he's the
equip.
furthest from a postmodern filmmaker I could think of, because not only is he uninterested in narrative, he doesn't even know what a meta narrative is. Like he
No,
doesn't care.
he
There's
doesn't
nothing.
care.
He doesn't care at all. So that's what
This
makes it
at that point, like The Abyss is just a documentary of its own making. At that point, everyone was
right.
actually miserable. She
Like I think it's
hated
good
that
to watch
scene.
before Aliens of the Deep, before his documentary. Like I think that that's a better pairing. It's like, oh wow, you
So
just wanted to do this. I gotcha.
so in that way, I'm like, I want to say it's his first experimental film of many, but that feels like it makes it sound more interesting than it actually is. Because I do
Just
think
like yeah.
it's an over budget, big scale, like 2.5 hour experimental film. Not as interesting as that sounds, though. It's really not. But that's what it is.
Just
It's
it's I don't share his interests, and it sucks when like you can so easily see what the driving force is behind that picture, especially when, I do like the marriage, but I'm not going to die on that hill. It's not like the best he's ever shown. Like
yeah.
Titanic, I think that the audience cares most about Jack and Rose, but James's heart is in the Bill Paxton character, who is obsessed with deep sea exploration.
So
That's why we
yeah,
spend like 45 minutes with him or some shit. Like that's why.
yeah.
Like that's probably why he even made it. Is so he could like show these things. Or even maybe he got
It
to
is
use it because he got to
explicitly
show it.
why he made it. He has said
Yeah.
multiple times that that is how he made it. The Titanic only got made because he already spent his own money doing undersea
And
photography, and he
yet that's a
showed.
love story that like informed every kid my age of what true love was supposed to encompass. And
It's
it was
just
a
that the
good
real love
lesson.
story was between James Cameron and
It is.
technology, which
But
is
the
a
thing
joke
is,
other
he
people have
pulled
been
it
making for like
off.
a decade. I
He
that's
pulled
not
it off
original, but
though, and there's like nothing problematic to me in his distillation and expression of a love that he's not invested in. He's invested in their corpses and their ghosts and actually digging it up. Like
yeah,
it's really weird. The Abyss though, um it's loved online, but I do honestly think that it's for a superficial reason because of the scarcity of its availability.
I
And I don't know why it's so hard to come across, but it is.
it's
It's a good
getting
movie though.
it's a important stepping stone. It had to happen. It had to
Yes,
happen to get for us to get to
it had to happen.
Cameron spending 13 years developing underwater mocap. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't gone through the Abyss ringer
It's
first.
just Abyss and True Lies are too simplistic for me. Like I can they're just
I
too
do like
easy.
True Lies. Isn't True Lies the next one?
No.
Oh, it's not.
1991 Terminator 2 Judgment
Oh,
Day,
yes, the
which
probably
is a
definitive
perfect film.
Hollywood movie. It's like the definitive Hollywood movie to me. But
In the most like charitable form, like in the best
yeah,
expression of Hollywood is Terminator 2. And like I said, I rewatched it today and it is perfectly made. It's perfectly shot and everything still works completely. You're on the edge of your seat. The pathos is still effortless. I don't I give a like, but when you grow up watching it as a kid, it's like My Bodyguard. What if I had a big, tall, like killing machine that did everything I told him to do and like said later, bro, hasta la vista, brah.
baby.
Like, and once again, perfectly cast. Edward Furlong was incredible. If people like to rail on child stars just being annoying, but I mean, Eliza Dushku in True Lies and Edward Furlong here and the Newt actor before, these are all great kids.
Mhm.
Great job. Linda Hamilton is so fucking cool in Terminator 2. I love her to death in Terminator 2. Robert Patrick, incredible, incredible performance from Robert Patrick. One of the best action villains ever. I think that he's a better villain than Arnie was in the first film,
I
personally.
agree. I agree.
Um,
And you
and
touched on this
here,
before,
yeah,
or
go
go
on.
ahead.
No, you
I
you
think
do
you were
it.
gonna say maybe the same thing I was, but This is like the most sinister
Hmm.
um James Cameron movie. Well, that's not true. True Lies is the most sinister, but True Lies is sinister because it's the first time we really get to know James as a person in some way. This is sinister because of the worldview he's showing us is very
Yes,
because this movie is like, to me, extremely critical of the family, extremely critical of
I
the
think so.
state.
Of the state, yes,
The
but of the
state,
state's control
extremely
over the
critical,
family, not of the family.
extremely critical of like the police.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. It's
but
critical of the police, of the state, of how the state removed Sarah from John. It's very positive of Sarah
well,
and John. It doesn't like the
that's
foster
what I
family
disagree
because
on, actually.
no, it loves Sarah and John. Of course it
I
loves Sarah and John.
it Sarah very obviously loves John, and
Hmm.
John clearly has at least like he has to fix his love for her, but eventually he does, and like comes to love her again after having a complicated relationship with her. But it also is like, I don't know, whenever I watch it, it's so obvious to me that like John was like really fucked up by her. Like she really imparted a lot of like shit to him. Like she like the way she raised him.
John, the way he was conceived. I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
I know. His entire life
She took
before
him
he was
to
even
like
born.
Bolivia or South America and taught him how to be like a guerrilla war fighter. Like
Yeah, that's fucked
necessary
up.
training for the leader of humanity, okay?
She like I think doesn't she imply that she was like or I think they both imply that she had like a rotating door of like shitty alcoholic boyfriends and
Yeah.
shit that
Well, not really. He mentioned like one he mentions her exes in the sense that she wasn't able to connect with them and she messes it up all the time.
yeah. And
Um
he also just talks about her like he's afraid of her throughout a lot of the
I
first part
don't
of
think
it.
so. Look, I
I
think
don't
that there's
know.
another, apart from the family theme, I think there is also a theme of ghosts that we just talked about in the abyss, and with
Yeah.
aliens, it's the ghost of its original. With this one, it's like you should think of like what could have been had it not been for technology, had it not been for the state. Like Sarah Connor would have been such an affectionate and caring
Yeah,
mother, but she was thrust into this position where
I
she had
agree.
no choice, no fate but what you make. But the secret of the film is everything's pre-written.
Yeah, no, I agree, but that's I think why it shows that like the family just has the capacity to cause irreparable harm to people.
No, no, it
I
didn't.
think it really does. I don't know. I thought I always saw this as like a very vicious film because it was saying like she should have had the ability to be a better mother, but she was kind of denied that, and now John got kind of fucked up because of that. And the happy ending is that they reform something and reconnect, and they're able to like patch it up. But I think the place he starts at is like very dark because he seems to really not give a fuck about his mom. He's like she's just a psycho who
But he does
try
care. He carries her picture around with him.
yeah.
He's just a kid who's pretending not to care.
but but he's like she was a psycho and now I just have like shitty foster parents who like they're not abusive
They're
but they
not that
clearly
shitty. They're not shitty
well
to the point of like they need to be impaled.
yeah I was gonna say they're shitty insofar as like it's obvious they don't really give a fuck about John and
That's
they
where
would
the
be very
killable
willing
offenses comes in. And also James Cameron knows that the audience will agree. Like for
yeah
some
oh yeah
reason.
this is the thing this is the easiest thing for me to get on with James Cameron is him saying if you adopt a kid and you do not love that kid to the end of time I think you should literally die and I'm
Or
like
like
you know what Jim
at its worst, it's against adoption. At its worst, it's against like the state interfering with a clearly mentally ill mother,
yeah well this is why
which is
I see the
Spielberg
film as
levels of
very
insanity. That's a Spielberg level of insanity there.
yeah I this
But
is why I think the film is like very very dark because it's like I really don't see like John I feel like John was fucked from the start
well, yeah, he was, and like
but
that's
like
what
by like the world by his family by his adopted family and this is
he
why I
was.
love the scene though where she
His
says
dad
like
was a time traveling like super soldier or whatever. Like it's
this,
gonna happen.
this is why though I treasure that part though where Linda Hamilton sees the Terminator and she's like this fucking machine could be the parent I wasn't able to be. I failed John. He would never fail John, and I love that scene partly because it tells you a lot about James, or like how much James loves technology. But I think that's like really poetic, is that she looks at like technology and she says, "You will be a better raiser of my child than I was." And
I mean,
I really love that gesture in a really fucked up way, because obviously that's really utopian, and that's just James being fetishy. But like I also
I
love
don't
that
know. I think it's
gesture.
another great like feminist film, honestly. I do think it's another great film about the strength of the mother against the state and against technology. She has that amazing monologue that would be crudely made fun of by Twitter today, where she's talking to Miles Dyson and she's like, all you men
Man,
created the atom bomb. You men created all these problems. You never created anything." And I'm like, whoa, bro, I
I love
forgot
that
this.
part though, because then John is like, "Shut the fuck up, mom. You're a hippie."
Yeah, but she has the voiceover. And I don't think she's an
No, no,
unreliable
I mean I
narrator.
agree. I think that part is sincere. I just like the kind of brevity or levity that John offers that
I
moment.
think it's
But
more heroic. I think that
it
like
is.
I
No,
think
I
that he thinks
agree.
that heroes are born of trauma. It's not like Ripley. Ripley was amazing in Aliens because in Cameron's opinion, he's like, well, she went through hell. She's got to be a badass. She's got to be cool
I
now.
I I have contradictory feelings about it, but I think ultimately he's like, yeah, learn the fucking rules. And obviously the whole first half of the film is a lot about how the state exists to make women think they're crazy so that they can get raped in
That's
a
it.
place they're not allowed to leave.
I think Terminator 2 is a perfect, and actually like a flawless blockbuster. By blockbuster standards, this is I think what they should all strive towards, especially like there's nothing more populist than a genuine knee-jerk distrust reaction to the police, to the state.
Yeah.
Like it's not even something that James Cameron has to convince you of. You just inherently don't believe them,
Yeah. I
you
I
know?
mean I love that part in the arcade when John's friend is like covers for him and
Yeah.
doesn't tell the cop about him. It's like,
Like
well, obviously you
instinctively
do.
just lies to
Who
the police.
wouldn't do that? Yeah.
Exactly. And also by rewatching it, like your first introductions to Sarah Connor, definitely aren't the most flattering. She's insane in a mental hospital, but James Cameron knows that that the love and protection of a mother like defeats and trumps all of those insane outbursts. And like you don't care. In fact, you view that as an abusive situation, especially since
Yeah.
he shows the psychiatrist walking down the hall laughing about her psychosis, like everything
It's
about
weird.
it.
It's weird though, because like it is good that he does that, but I feel like even if he didn't have that part where like was the dude do like fucking lick her face, you would
Yeah,
still
she was
kind of
sexually assaulted there.
I feel like you would still implicitly interpret the scenario as abusive. Like I feel like you would still
Mhm.
implicitly be on her side just by default. It helps that he encourages you to take that position, but like, and he kind of shows very clearly like, yeah, these people are evil. But like I like that he is in tune with like, yeah, like most people just view these things suspiciously.
Yeah.
Like I actually love how the the only person at the beginning, like the fucking kids are afraid of the cops and run away from them instinctively. But the people that like implicitly trust the cops are the adopted parents chosen by the state who don't love their child, you
Yeah.
know? And they're like, "Oh, I don't know who you are. You won't tell me why you're looking for my son. I'll tell you where he is. Go find him, please." Like, you don't know him. I'm like, but you're just trusting him.
I think this is
It,
a great film to watch as a kid, honestly. I also forgot that for the majority of the film, Arnold's doing like a pacifier walkthrough. Like he's just shooting people in the legs because John's like, don't kill him.
Yeah,
Like,
I do. I remember like watching, loving this as a teenager and always thinking about all the action in it. And then I watched it again like sometime later. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot like no one is actually killed in this movie by the
except
Terminator.
by the cop. It's just like, and
Yeah,
it's
the
horrible.
villain's the only one that kills people, but like Arnold
Robert
doesn't
Patrick
kill
was
anybody.
so good.
He's so
So
good.
good. Oh my God. Brilliant.
I
So
think
creepy. Yeah.
I think James Cameron said something to the effect of like, this is a misquote, but something effective like it's supposed to be like a Ford truck fighting a Porsche or something.
No, that makes sense for sure.
Like that's how he envisioned it. Is
But
like
that but
Arnold
that
is this
speaks
like
to the populist as well. It's like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's the
exactly.
try. Yeah, it's a good old reliable. Like we'll always pull through.
It's
And
this
I
like
love it.
working class alliance that he has. That's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, and there is this like multicultural idea of Cameron's too, in the idea that I love that Sarah Connor has a secret weapon stash at the Mexican ranch or whatever she goes to. Has a
Actually,
secret like yeah, go on.
or I was gonna say the same thing. The actress that played Vasquez is in this movie.
Oh, was she there?
Do you know who she is?
No?
She's the stepmom.
What really? That was
That's
her?
Vasquez, bro. She's also in, I think, True Lies in a similar role. She's in one other James Cameron movie in a similar role where it's like you wouldn't know that's her
Oh, I
unless you.
recognized the adopted the stepdad in this, I guess. As
Yeah, he's a common like character actor
yeah,
and
he's the
like,
bad husband in Candyman.
but yeah,
But
I forgot about that. But
but
yeah,
no, I didn't know
no.
that was Vasquez. But no, that's awesome. No, Terminator 2 is just perfect, and I completely disagree. I think it's probably one of the strongest blockbuster films or mainstream films about the about a single mother raising a child in a world that seems unpredictable and unfair.
Oh, I think it's about exactly the same thing. I just
But
don't
I
think
think
it's
it's very favorable.
optimistic.
Like that's the best possible result
Yeah.
is John Connor.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree with that. I think John wins this in the end. Like he comes out extremely strong from the experience, and
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
don't.
and
I
also
love
like
it
the
to pieces.
pathos is effortless. Like it still works. My eyes teared up a bit when Arnold was getting lowered into the vat of lava. I was,
Yeah, I've been
I was
having
like,
this
oh.
experience where
And
that
it's
doesn't
mirrored
happen
perfectly
anymore.
because like the height of Sarah Connor's love didn't need to be tested, but it was regardless where Robert Patrick had her and he was gonna like shove a needle into her eyeball if she didn't call out for John.
Yeah,
But she wouldn't and was willing to die for it. And of course, 5 minutes later, Arnold understands what sacrifice means as well and sacrifices
yeah,
himself for
love
humanity.
that gesture. I
Yeah, it's
love that
awesome.
gesture. It's
Which
beautiful.
shows like how intensely James Cameron might feel that these familial bonds have to go. Like it has to be life or death, or else it's something that's untrue in a way. Like The Abyss
Well,
tested that completely, like all the time. Like this,
yeah,
and it repaired their trauma, repaired their marriage. That's something that Cameron's interested in too. Is that trauma is something that repairs more than distresses, which is weird, but it's what he
yeah. I
likes.
mean, it's what repairs. That's why I think
I think it's
his
what the
relationship with
populist
his.
wants to see too, though. I think they want to go to a movie and not be told that they're fucked up, but that they're stronger for everything that they went through. That's the
Oh
popular
no,
idea.
that's why I think like my reading of the movie isn't as like pessimistic as it sounds, because I do think the movie kind of paints Sarah as, even if by circumstances out of her control,
Yes.
something of a failed mother who rebuilds a relationship with her son who she did fuck up a little bit. But they fix it, I think, by the end.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I do think she has like this boundless love for him, but I also think that because of situations out of her control, she fucked up John a little bit, and he didn't trust her because of it. And I
Well,
think
yeah,
by
but
the
that but
end, he
that's
kind of
why I wouldn't say she fucked him up. I would ultimately place the blame at the state, at technology, at
that gets into a very complicated wormhole of like who's really at fault, society or
well, it's never James Cameron's women. They are never at fault.
yeah.
So
But yeah, Terminator 2, by the way, on your similar to what you said, I so many movies I've like been returning to in the past year that I were very formative for me, and that I'm
mhm.
realizing like I suddenly, because I've now seen them a million times and I'm also in my mid 20s, I'm like eh, I'm seeing the seams and they no longer impact me as like this experience thing that like I can get lost in because I just see the mechanics of them now because I'm too familiar with them, and I'm
But
also not a kid anymore. But Terminator 2, like I
yeah,
get so
yeah.
fucking into it. It's so
Yeah.
good. I'm
And
like
just
I
talking
can
about like those impactful moments, if it came out in 91, Like it must have been one of the very first times that I was told to not trust the police.
Yeah,
Very first time. And it was that's a very good lesson. These are great lessons.
yeah.
Like
Well,
the
we're gonna
crown
get
upon
into
his head
that.
is heavy, dude. The crown
I
upon his
think
head is so heavy.
Avatar has nothing but positive things to teach us, but we'll get to that later.
We'll get there later. For now, let's go to 1994, True Lies. I believe I did call this one my least favorite because
Which I
it
understand.
doesn't, he doesn't, um, whereas The Abyss is super informative to his craft and his interests, True Lies it could disappear and it wouldn't affect his catalog at all for me.
Yeah. No, it doesn't
Um,
really have any place in the
no, I mean, the idea
arc.
of family is certainly worked in here. For me personally too, like, I'm gonna like irritate idiots online, but Eliza Dushku is one of my favorite people that ever existed, and the fact that she was sexually abused by a stunt coordinator while working on this show kind of shows like a lack of control that James Cameron had for this set.
No, I
And
agree.
the idea that that could happen to someone like that shouldn't happen to anyone, but the fact that it happened to one of my ultimate queens is unforgivable. So like I can't even watch this movie and be like, well, behind the scenes she's being like abused, like,
Yeah.
and that's unforgivable. And
No,
James
again, like
Cameron,
he's a
every director,
tyrant.
like there's a crown and it's heavy, but every director, no matter how large it is, in fact, if it is large, I believe a man named Spider-Man said something about great responsibility once, but you need to be able to control your set, especially if it's this out of control. If like your child actor was being abused by a stunt coordinator, you should have known this. You should have
Yeah.
looked into that guy's past or anything. Do something. You have kids on set, man. Like do something,
It's
bro.
it's really important. The similar things happen. I mean, not sexual assault as far as I know anyway on the Abyss, but like the Abyss was also like a horrible set. I know the scene that we actually talked about where they're trying to resuscitate her
Yeah.
after she died. They were shooting that scene like all fucking day. So it was just a whole day of this woman getting like her chest hit and her face
Yeah.
slapped
I think
and
I
Ed
read about
Harris
that.
screaming at her. And she said, and also why I think she was like partly topless for that to film that. And so by the end of it, she just walked off set and said, "I'm not a fucking animal," and then
Yeah.
left. And then all the reaction shots of Ed Harris, like shot reverse shot of just Ed Harris, he's talking to thin air because she left the set.
Yeah.
And so shit like that. And Ed Harris, I know, had a nervous breakdown at one point during the shoot. So
James Cameron only cares about the end product, but then he doesn't even
yeah,
care about it as a product or a film. He cares about it as this thing that has a great amount of power. Like he's not
yeah,
uh like I'm being pretty well, we should be harsh on this.
we should.
As a
No,
director, control your set, control the people you have on it, take care of them, and keep them safe. That's the bare minimum. The fucking manager at McDonald's can do that. Okay, like you should be able to do this, James.
it happened on Titanic too. I know Leo and Winslet, I think, have been like moderately favorable toward the experience, but you can tell from the way
Yeah.
they talk about it that they like really went through shit. Like
I
that
think I
Leo
remember,
Leo almost
yeah.
got injured, I think, a few times and
Oh
shit,
yeah.
but they just kind of
Oh,
like,
I hate to do the contest of misery. Normally, like I've read about aliens where like stunt people almost died,
yeah,
And if this is a stunt coordinator for True Lies, he's more interested in the stunts than the actors. Even like I don't want to know that maybe James knew. Like I don't want to know this
yeah,
because if there's something he cares about, it's what's a stunt, right? So he's
yeah,
definitely communicating with the stunt coordinator. But I mean, this is like sexual assault of a child.
yeah,
It's insane. Um, the other stuff you can't argue away, like no one's life should be in danger, but we're talking about like a huge amount of trauma. And True
yeah.
Lies, if we are to analyze it, there's not much there
Well,
to begin
I
with.
would kind of disagree. I think there's almost too much.
Hmm.
It's like the most vitriolic movie of the 90s, I think. I for the record, I actually think it's a really entertaining, awesome to watch movie. I would easily watch again. My only real problem is that I think it's like 30 minutes too long. By the time of the
Mm,
helicopter sequence, I'm like the part where Jamie Curtis is like dangling from the helicopter. I'm like, I wish the movie would just end there. I don't need this like second finale where they save his daughter. it goes on way too long, I think. But like the first like hour, 40 minutes or so, I think is just rock star filmmaking.
No, I think he
But
does it well, but I don't think he could make a bad movie because he knows the mechanics of filmmaking.
yeah, but it's also a deeply psychotic and violently disturbing movie about
Hmm.
a man who got divorced like 4 times in a decade. And you can tell why he got divorced like 4 times in a decade. 3 or 4, I forget which, but he got divorced multiple times within that decade. And it's super obvious why if you watch True
Yeah,
Lies. Like he is, that's a vitriolic movie. Like it is,
no, it is.
the shit Arnold puts JP Curtis through in that movie is
Yeah,
horrifying. It's like you don't normally expect to see that degree of like psychology in James Cameron because he usually doesn't give a shit about psychology, but like
no.
that is a movie you could write a fucking book about how the mind of the man that made it. I said earlier, I'm contradicting myself. I said earlier that it's like hard to know anything about James Cameron. This is like the one instance where I'm like something about James Cameron kind of got through. Because this is like the one time where I feel like he's actually being a little personal with his hate for someone. It feels personal. I don't know if it's authentically personal or if he was just, putting on to make a movie that he thought would be fun, but it feels personal. I don't know. It
I
to
think
me,
he's such a guarded person that I don't think we've ever gotten like a
that's
true
why I don't know.
sensitivity.
That's why I don't know. I
Only because
really
I
don't
bet
know.
if we looked at movies made between 93 and 95, it's like, oh shit, this was a fucking weird time to be
Yeah,
to be in a
yeah.
movie.
But
I
as
think he's far too guarded and sensitive and far too smart to like let it slip up for True Lies.
yeah, I don't know.
I
I don't know.
I think he's like, you know,
It's one of those things where it seems out of character, but it also seems like too good to be true. So I'm like, I
well,
don't really know what to do with it.
much
Uh,
like The Abyss, this one is also incredibly difficult to find. Um, and I don't know why it's another title that's hard to find, which like builds up its like reputation because of its
hmm,
scarcity. But this one could stay lost for me. But True Lies, it was huge when it came out, though. I mean, I was only four, but I remember people talking about it well into like the late 90s for sure.
hmm.
Um, fuck. Oh yeah, Bill Paxton, Tom Arnold.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
I
maybe
wanted to
this
say Bill
was
Paxton. This is my favorite Bill Paxton performance by far, bar none. It's my favorite Bill Paxton role. I love him in this movie. He is so every time he's on screen, I lose it. It's
oh,
so good.
I forgot to include this part. After this, we're just done talking about True Lies. I didn't know this happened. Oh, say, okay. Elijah Dushku stated that while filming True Lies, when she was 12, she was molested by the stunt coordinator, Joel Kramer. Then, according to her, soon after that, an adult friend of hers confronted Kramer on set, and that same day, Dushku herself was injured during a stunt and several of her ribs were broken, while Kramer was responsible for her safety.
Damn, that sounds about
Yeah, that's
right.
crazy. Isn't that fucking insane?
That's horrible.
Yeah, so now I'm not engaging with this movie. That's insane. I
So,
didn't know about
but
the stunt part that she broke her ribs.
I think I knew about that, but might have forgot. But I'm gonna stop you right there before we go to Titanic. There's two little movies I want to talk about
What?
that I think are important to talk about.
Are any of them made by Catherine Bigelow?
One is first, I'm going
There
to
we
talk
go.
about the other one that is directed by James Cameron. That's
Okay,
called
do it.
Alita Battle Angel. He started work on it
Oh,
in the
right.
90s. He started work on it in the 90s, I think, and worked on it throughout that decade, well into the 2000s. I'll bring it up again before or after Avatar, just because I think it's a good segue to Avatar 2. But like, needless to say, I wanted to just plant the seed that at this point in time, he is making a movie about like a transhuman robot cyborg girl. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Alternatively, yes, Strange Days, which I'm not gonna be the guy who says, yeah, he ghost directed Strange Days. But because I actually like Point Break and I think
You know
Catherine
what?
Bigelow, at least
True
at this point,
Lies could have been directed by Bigelow. It has more in
it's
common with
really
Point
weird.
Break.
But Strange Days, I think, is for one, I've said some days I tell people that it's my favorite movie James Cameron was involved in. I don't know if in the end I would actually commit to that position, but whenever I watch it, I'm like, oh man, this is good shit. it's a really good, I think, stepping stone. I think it's the next major stepping stone because it's a movie. Because again, he's also by this point in time already started conceiving of Avatar. And during this time when he's conceiving of Avatar, a movie that was inspired by his mother's dreams about sending your
Yeah, I don't know any
consciousness.
of that. When we get to Avatar, it's going to be a blast because I really don't know
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Avatar was inspired by his mother's dreams, and it's a movie about like transferring your consciousness between bodies. As he's conceiving of that, he writes a movie screenplay about putting on a thing on your head and you can relive somebody's memories using technology, like a cyberpunk narrative about
Ah,
I'm
hmm.
going to relive someone's memories using technology, and it becomes like a black market trade thing. And then this technology ends up enacting major social change, which is a very James Cameron
That's
concept.
it.
It's
Yeah.
because
It's maybe even
and
too on the nose. They see
it
that I
is
would say that is Cameron. That is Cameron's like
yeah
driving motivation to making films.
is to prove that technology changes the
And
world.
maybe
Like
even when you watch a film, you are experiencing someone else's dream and you're living it.
yeah, literally if you watch
Yeah.
Avatar. But
Yes.
yeah, and it's a little on the nose because everything going in on in LA
Not in a
in
bad
the
way. Not in a
90s.
bad way though. It's
No,
not
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
I know some people think it's like too in your face. I don't really think it is. It's and I think that's mostly painted by like watching it post 2010s when like the events of the movie have literally happened in real
Right.
life, where like videos of cops unjustly executing people circulated on the internet and that caused riots. So like the
Mhm.
events of the movie have literally happened now, which is like the first time that ever happened with a fucking cyberpunk movie. But I also think it is just like a potent narrative of like so you can relive people's memories, and this is like a black market technology used for people's own kind of like fetishes or kind of drives, and it accidentally becomes this thing that enacts like major important shifts in America. Like the cops are suddenly being questioned. This is like also again in the canon of James Cameron thinks cops are full of shit.
Yeah.
We have Strange Days where the villains are literally the police. And
It's awesome. I haven't seen Strange Days in over 10 years, so
yeah, I would say
so
more about it if you
yeah,
had.
you're my girl on this. And you're also gonna be my girl on Avatar because
Yeah.
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it like you've seen it. You know it. I don't.
But yeah, Strange Days I think is just a remarkable movie. I think it's awesome. It's one of those movies I could watch like beginning to end a million times. It's very well directed, like Point Break is by
Yeah, and I don't
Bigelow.
think it's like
But
insulting of you saying that what's generally considered to be Catherine Bigelow's worst movie was secretly not directed by her. That's fine. She has a
mm,
language all her own. I think Point Break and
yeah,
Near Dark or even Zero Dark 30, like she's proved that she's incredible.
yeah,
It's
no,
fine.
I
We're
don't
not
think she
taking
needs.
anything away.
I don't think. Yeah, people have come at me about that, saying like, "Oh, you're disrespecting like Catherine Bigelow. You're
Yeah.
being misogynistic." First of all, I'm like, call me misogynistic. I'm allowed, but more, no, I'm joking. But more so, I like with Robert Rodriguez and Alita. I just straight the fuck up
Yeah.
consider James Cameron the artist of that movie more
I
than
think
him.
so too. And like
But
I think Robert was probably like, the DA, a PA or something, right? Like
yeah,
but he
but
loves him so much, right? So
I don't
if
think
you
either of
told
them are worried about
Rodriguez to
it.
do an impression of Cameron, I think he could do it.
Yeah, I agree. But with Strange Days, I'm like, no, no. Catherine Bigelow directed it, obviously.
Yeah.
I would not argue anyone else did.
I just
I
think
just
that,
think
yeah,
it's a
Rodriguez
screenplay.
doesn't care about the purity of his movies. He would tell you
I agree.
immediately that he didn't direct it. Like, remember, he lost his Directors Guild card because he put Frank Miller's name next to his on Sin
Yeah.
City. Like, he
He's
didn't
too
actually
loyal.
direct
He's
it.
loyal. He's loyal.
But hey,
But
I just want to mention the Robert Patrick connection, the Faculty Beautiful movie. So, not taking anything away from Rodriguez either. In fact,
yeah.
probably heightening his image.
But yeah, I only bring it up to say that like no, I don't think he ghost directed it or anything, but he wrote the screenplay, and the screenplay is filled to burst with every single one of his career long obsessions, like almost to a T. It covers like almost every fucking base except the family angle. But everything else, and even then it does it still once again revolves around a relationship. Although this time a love triangle.
Mm.
But
I haven't seen Alita, so
no, I'm talking about sorry, Strange
Strange
Days.
Days. I
Strange
haven't seen that
Days,
in a
yeah.
million years.
Yeah,
But
Strange Days is
Ray Fiennes, right? Is that Ray Fiennes?
yeah, in his most
Yeah.
like electric, like magnetic performance. He really
Are
channels
you
Sigourney
sure? Have you
Weaver
seen
now.
Schindler's List, man?
Oh no, he's so good in Strange Days because he plays this like skeevy fucking asshole with a heart of gold, and it's really good. But anyway, I just want to mention that mostly because at this point, again, like since we're like charting the arc of Cameron, this
Yeah.
is him like really definitively saying because like it's in Terminator, obvious or sorry, Terminator 2, this kind of like utopian vision of technology because the T-800 is a hero. But like this
Yeah.
is literally him saying like no, like the way the world will be changed in a
Yes.
very material, personal, important way by these new technologies that we might take for granted at the start.
That's
It's
why
like
I'm, yeah. I don't know
it's
if I said it earlier when you were talking about T2 and about you brought up Sarah looking on um at Arnold
John.
and John like getting bonding so clearly well. And I think you said it about, that's probably a good statement about how much James does love technology. And that's why I also think
Yeah.
Terminator 2 has so much heart in it because yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's where he's bridging it. But the Porsche versus the thing, there's a deep
Yeah.
level of like classist zealotry to him that is really
Yeah.
fun and probably expressed really well in Strange Days.
It
So
is. I mean, like one of the central characters is like I if I remember correctly, she's like a singer who's like low key. If I remember correctly, like sort of prostituting herself off, and she's being like manipulated by the police. And like Ray Fiennes is obviously like on the outskirts, so he's like one of the people the police don't care about, and so
mm,
on and so forth. And the like finale of the movie is that like his love interest, the other main character, she is a black woman who's like being attacked by the police, and the people kind
wow.
of unanimously like come together to say like stop. It's a really politically charged movie. But and I know I'm sure part of that is purely like he simply watched the news and said, "Oh, people care," and so he in kind of a sociopathic way. But I also think he's aware that these things actually are consequential. That they're that
Yeah.
minorities are victimized by the police and so on and so forth. But
Oh, for
anyway,
real.
yeah, Titanic.
1997. Speaking of a baseline of class stratification,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I mean that's one of the most brilliant. It's my favorite Cameron movie. Every marker is hit perfectly. The fact that Jack is some poor artist with a death wish, it was
yeah,
engaging with like the highest echelon of society inside of a doomed ship, which could clearly just be like a symbol for America itself. Like, and
yeah,
which is a strong theme. And Terminator 2 said it best with like it's in your nature to destroy each other, like that kind of idea. But for like if there's a living embodiment of Icarus flying too close to the sun, it's James Cameron. So I don't
yeah,
necessarily know what he means by that. But Titanic is one of the most impactful movies on my life. It was my introduction to not only eroticism, but more importantly, passion and like romance and loss.
mhm.
All four of those things, James Cameron cares nothing about, but everyone who watched it did. You know,
Yeah.
like I imagine James Cameron chuckling to himself at the Celine Dion song. Like, that's perfect. That'll work. That'll do it.
That'll get them.
Yeah, exactly. But it works so well. And none of the lessons of it have damaged me. Like I think it's a very good love story that had a lot of impact. We're not here having a Twilight discussion about how fucking bonkers the next generation's introduction to love and romance would be. But Titanic kind of perfect. I really, there's nothing bad I could possibly say about it. I think the structure is wonderful. I think that James Cameron w wanted to make and he wanted to have fun with deep sea exploration, but
Yeah,
he knew he had to drape it with the most ostentatious disaster romance story ever, and yet have it feel entirely optimistic in the process, even though you're being shown some of the most devastating things possible. Like you're being shown like a mother putting her child to sleep in the poor
yeah,
section of the cabin, right before they're or like an elderly couple like holding hands while like the water level's
Yeah.
rising. And it's like those parts I'm like, I think James is having a blast. But then we
Oh
have,
yeah. He is sociopathic. Like
and he's
you did
obsessed
it's the
with like,
abyss but better. It's the abyss
yeah,
but done right.
he's obsessed with physics. Like he loves, the thing is, it's so beautifully structured because we go on like a little tour of the ship with like,
Yeah.
and it's masked with like Rose and Jack running around the ship away from security guards and going like into like the coal section, the engineer section, through all these fancy sections that in the moment we're being shown it because we're swept away in their love like we are, but an hour later we'll be shown those same moments as death traps, as like
Yeah.
these impossible death, like Saw level death traps where these characters are going to be tortured and murdered. And a lot of them, it's like the Terminator 2 thing, like for no fault of their own, you know? I mean, it is to blame in James Cameron's world are like the over ambitious rich architects, designers, and like businessmen, right? But the poor people who are just locked to die,
Yeah.
you know, that's once again, I don't know. You say something. I've been rambling
Um
incoherently, but it's been pretty fun.
I I don't know where to start. I mean, first of all, I kind of feel like this is the most simultaneously like the most like well maybe Avatar is. I was gonna say the most experimental James Cameron movie, and it probably is. But Avatar might have it be, but it's like incredibly experimental, but then also like classical in a way where I feel like the way it engages with class is very in tune with like films from like the 20s and 30s almost. Like
Yeah, I was
it
gonna say it's
reminds me of like
experimental in the most traditional or like formal way possible because he's like he must have watched a bunch of movies or segments from 30s epic romances, like even Gone with the Wind, and was like, I'm gonna transpose this here. Like it's weird shit
it,
that works.
it reminds me of like it reminds me of like Sternberg, of like Chaplin, of like
Mm-hmm.
John Ford. It's really weird, but which is probably why I kind of view it in, I'm sorry to use the word, like kind of like a Brechtian way, where I'm like, I when I originally watched as a kid, I was like actually very invested in the romance.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it again for the first time in fucking years a few months ago, and I realized I was like, I think I'm watching this the way James Cameron watches it, which is to say, like I'm realizing at least at this point in my life, I'm not really swept up in it in the way I get swept up in Aliens or T2, and in the way I was when I was younger too. But even so, even though I'm not really like immersed in the romance and the story, I am overwhelmingly in awe of how it is made. Like it is from every single shot. I'm just amazed by the sequence of events. I'm amazed by like you said, like how it uses the melodrama to familiarize you with like this enormous ship, and then turns that ship into a dom you know, like a toppling domino set of set pieces that lead from one to the next. And it's immaculately put together. I view, I think, Jack and Rose in like a very disconnected way, where I'm not sure how much I actually care about them, but I'm also like mesmerized by them and how they move across the frame.
I love that you said model, but I would argue that these are models that James Cameron cares about and invites the audience to care about. Because I think that there's somehow less hiding here um, from James, since
I
I'm
agree.
probably the
I
most
agree.
one of the most memorable scenes of the film doesn't involve any effects whatsoever, and it's when Kate actually models for Leo for the drawing, which invites the audience in. I think that's James Cameron also being actually investing some emotional time into the idea of these models.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, of course, I will not leave our thesis of what he really cares about is underwater exploration, and the disaster part of the film is where he is most excited filmically.
Mhm.
But
It's where the
there
movie
is
becomes
heart
most
here.
like Buster Keaton or
Well,
Chaplin.
I love
Just
that it's his follow-up to True Lies, and I love that the romance of this film does feel heartfelt, and that could be due to, I mean, it primarily probably is due to the chemistry of the two leads, but
Yes.
at the same time, Cameron was so remarkably kind to them in his composition, and actually gave them time and gave them like the best possible scenarios to express that kind of love. There is like, it is heartfelt, but you know, it's James Cameron, so it's
Heartfelt,
heartfelt
yeah.
because it has to be first and
Yeah.
foremost, but secondly because he is interested. And
I
well, and the most tragic thing that he could possibly think of for a film like Titanic is that it's the loss of love, the loss of opportunity, loss of possibility, just like Terminator 2 with the loss of like these like a perfect family unit,
Mhm.
devastated by circumstance and things outside of their control. Also the ghost thing, of course, this is I think where that comes in
There's
the
literally a
biggest.
shot
Yeah,
where it's the shot where they're holding each other on the front of the ship, and then it fades to the sunken ship, but you still see the silhouette
yeah.
of them holding each other like they're literally ghosts
Oh
on
God,
the
like
ship.
I actually do like cry. I don't care. It's one of my favorite films. I do cry at the very end when like Rose dies or something, goes back to that ship and
Yeah.
like Jack is there, like, let me have your hand. And you see all those familiar characters who we just saw brutalized in the most unfortunate and darkly comic ways,
Yeah.
sometimes. Like that's the thing. The killable offenses here are also wild. But the thing is with this one, he's not afraid to not give the audience something. Like we all wanted to see Billy Zane die, and James Cameron has him live, you know, right? Right? Like it's
Well,
the
he
only
has
time
him
where he
commit
doesn't do
suicide
it.
off screen like 13
I
years
remember
later.
that now. Yeah,
Like a
yeah.
decade, he's like, yeah, a decade later, he killed himself off
But
screen.
he hits
It's
every mark and marks that I know he does not personally believe in. Like
yeah,
there are Capra-esque, even Spielbergian qualities to Titanic, in the idea that like you don't ever remember it, but Kate Winslet finally free from the horrors of Titanic, the first thing she sees or feels peaceful or tranquil about is the Statue of Liberty. Like there is like a patriotism there, and I'm like, no, James, you don't believe that that's like the land of opportunity. You're just doing that because you just pulled on every other heartstring available, and you're like, well, full Monty, let's do the whole fucking thing. Why not? I'm already
yeah,
here.
yeah.
You
I
can't blame him for it.
I did want to say on Winslet, when I watched it recently again for the first time in years, I thought she was kind of unbearable for a lot of the.
Mm-mm.
Bear with me. I thought I wasn't having her performance for the first leg of the movie. Then there's this change that occurs, and this is why I think it was partly deliberate on her part. The part where Jack takes her to the party
I was
on the
just thinking of
underfloor.
that. It's one of the
Suddenly,
best moments.
there's this shot where it's maybe my favorite shot of the movie actually. I don't know why it just sticks in my memory where they're spinning each other and you see her
Yes.
looking like lovingly into the camera, and that's like where suddenly like she becomes a person,
Well, yeah,
and
literally, like
suddenly
she was
for the
liberated.
for the rest of the movie she becomes my favorite fucking
Yeah.
part of it.
And
It's so weird.
judging by how Cameron filmed that dance scene, I would love to see a musical from him. I'm just thinking of it now.
Yeah,
Like he knows how
his
to
West
film
Side
kinetic move.
Story.
Like he's such a kinetic filmmaker that when they're dancing up there on that table together, it's such a liberating feeling, perfectly juxtaposed to like the stuffy, rich cigar
Yeah.
houses, right? Like it's so well done and it's effortless.
It's really interesting for a performance though, just because I find her so artificial, but then I realize like she's supposed to come off artificial in the first leg of the movie, and then suddenly
Yeah.
she's allowed to be a person and she becomes the most engaging thing on screen.
Oh, she's
Um,
phenomenal.
I'd also, as far as like the class thing, I think it's completely, a lot of people have criticized it, and I think both are right. I think both the kind of, I it might have actually been Zizek, which is hilarious. Who said the thing about like how the whole thing is that Jack, this working class boy, dies for the benefit of this bourgeois woman's personal development, which really amounts to in the end her finding ways to use the wealth that the movie seems to imply she unjustly has to enjoy herself.
Yeah, but
I
that's
think
also
that's
like grossly like marginalizing her character. She's just a
well,
product of her like of a thing that she didn't actually have anymore. She was forced into that life. She was actually poor
yeah.
at that point.
I I'll say like I think it's partly true, but I also just think that the movie does an exceptional job of just detailing these class relationships on screen. It reminds me of, again, like John Ford, where
Oh, that
like
thought.
people are willing to like say like a certain movie by John Ford is like propagandistic, when in reality it probably makes like the best case for destroying America ever, you know what I mean? It does that thing where like people will watch The Searchers and be deeply offended by it, while like other people watch The Searchers and they're like,
Oh
this is
yeah.
so obviously about how John Wayne is Hitler, you know what I mean? So Titanic, I think, is a little less considered than that on that front, because
No, and I think that like
I think
even if
it's
there
just
was like a proper rule, like a proper list of things that a bourgeois woman is supposed to do in order to cleanse herself, then Kate
mhm.
Winslet did all of those things at rapid speed in the last hour of the film. Like she
Yeah.
did so many self-sacrificial fucking things that
Mhm.
okay, she earned it. And also James Cameron, he's a bit old-fashioned. The guy has to die. The girl can't be the one in the fucking water. It would not have hit hard because it's a needless sacrifice that was just thrust upon them by an unfair world of people who tried to fly too close to the sun. It had to be her. Unless you wanted the guy to be bourgeois and the girl to be poor, that would be exciting, actually. That would
I
be
I
a million
also
dollar idea.
I also wanted to mention this. This is has the triumphant return of Jim's kind of occasional saccharine kind of elements,
Yeah.
like almost ones that seem uncharacteristic. Like every like shot of Old Rose feels like not a James Cameron movie. You know, like the way that
Yeah.
woman is acting, it doesn't feel like how people typically act. It's so like sentimental. Like, not to say that he's never been sentimental, but it's like he's not usually that like whimsical
Well,
about it. You know what I mean? Like she feels like an ET character, but like I find it
the the
endearing.
the, the driving motivation of the plot is of sentimentality of that
Yeah,
stupid
exactly. And
necklace, right?
that's why I question that observation even.
No, it just has to be there. If he's lifting the language of old epics, sentimentality has to be there because there's always a tragedy to everything that's sentimental because normally there's a nostalgia applied to sentimentality, meaning that it's gone. You can't
Hmm.
have it anymore. So James just knew the heartstrings that time. Like he knew exactly what to do. I forgive it here because it belongs in the framework of Titanic. The Abyss was a bit much.
Again, this is just the abyss, but he did everything right. Um, you know, it's kind of the same motivation. He just wants to make a movie about stuff that's underwater that you find. And
Yeah, yeah, Jack is just like drowning and sees those
although
aliens kind of look remarkably similar to the robot bad guy from T2, just different color,
they do,
actually.
but this is a little more obviously like explicitly like experimental with its the way it's put together. Like there's shots where like the boat like looks uncanny but also gorgeous. And also
Hmm.
the fact that like some of the frames look completely not real but real at the same time. And
Hmm.
it's such a strange effect that I find interesting. And also again because as always the real romance is
Yes.
Jim and his precious like warehouse of equipment.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
he loves Bill Paxton is his favorite character in this film.
he
He
had to
just
be.
yeah.
He
Um,
had to be.
but I do think there's something heartfelt to it. Like even if I could be fun and say that this is like James Cameron like through Bill Paxton being like, all right, I have to deal with all of this romance and sentimentality to get to where I really want to be,
I'm gonna go.
then in the end, like he found himself a little bit affected by it. Just
Yeah.
a little changed by it. Um, I'm being gross. I'm being grossly sentimental, but that's what the film should drive you to do, and it hits
Mhm.
every marker in order for you to feel that way. Um, if you look at his list of films before, like True Lies, Terminator 2, Abyss, Aliens, Terminator, Piranha 2, like I would never have thought that he
Yeah,
had this in him, let alone to
yeah,
this huge effect. You want to talk about a massively
yeah.
successful
I
film? That was the most successful film for a while.
I feel like this is like to this day probably one of at least like one of the top five like definitive American films like ever made,
Yeah.
which isn't to say it's the best. I just feel like even if you fucking hate this movie, it's kind of I feel like undeniable how it fucking dominated culture. And it's weird because the other movies that absolutely dominated American culture are ones that come from a much different place, I guess, like George Lucas,
Yeah.
making Star Wars, which is almost entirely constructed of references to movies and things he loves. And that's why those like um those gestures like become sentimental for the viewer, I think, in Star Wars, is because they were sentimental for the creator, like George Lucas was being nostalgic by making Star
Yeah.
Wars, and by extension that makes the film like nostalgic for other people. That's not really the case in Titanic, but
No.
he cared more about the craftsmanship of it, and yet like its text has absolutely penetrated culture in
And still,
America.
yeah. And it's probably only with Titanic and Terminator that I could at least see cinematic influences. But
Yeah.
like, while we can agree that he definitely is definitely learning lessons from Ford and Sternberg, I can't say if he likes them or appreciates
Oh,
their
absolutely
craft.
not.
I don't know.
It's pure. It feels like someone who made movies in the 20s or the teens even, in the sense that like he doesn't have anything to draw on, so he's just kind of drawing on what seems to make sense
Right.
what he's trying to achieve, if that makes sense. Like how Chaplin was kind of uh I feel like commentary on Chaplin always talks about how like simple his frames are, and yet like how complicated they are at the same time, how like kind of void of kind of an artistry, and yet like overwhelmingly artful in a way.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's something similar going on here, where it's the kind of most simple motives for things. Why did you do this, Jim? Why would it make sense?
Exactly.
Because it's
That's how
to
I
do
feel
the
for
thing.
most of his filmography is like he knows exactly what he's doing because he's well taught, well versed. Um, but I don't know if he likes cinema. I know he likes the power that films can have, and the larger the scope, the larger the amount of people he can affect, and he calls himself a populist. And I do think that he has moved culture into better areas, at least superficially, or even
Mhm.
massively, because like we said, so many people saw Titanic, so many people have seen Terminator 2, and you can't watch those two films and not learn something about class or social stratification or about how kind of fucked it is to be a mother, a single mother in the modern age. Like you can't walk away without learning those things from these movies. I just don't even know if he has that kind of political or social drive to him as a person, but I would have to say that he does because I don't see any other reason for making the kinds of films that he does. It's not just so he can go underwater and search for lost shit. Like there are other ways he could do that. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's doing.
He's a
Um,
mystery.
he really is. And also because I don't trust a fucking word he says. Like I don't want someone in the comments to be like, well, he clearly said what this was about. Like, no, don't trust him. Don't ever trust James Cameron. He's not gonna tell you. He's gonna be like
Again,
Hitchcock in a way and just send you in blind areas.
we're talking about a guy that spent 13 fucking years making two sequels because he
Yeah.
wanted to wait until he could do underwater mocap. Like he just said, I have time to kill. I got nothing better to do.
Oh
I'll
my
wait.
God.
He waited till the 2000s to make Avatar. He wanted to make it in the 90s, but he waited because he's
Well,
like, I have some time. I'll live forever. I don't care. They'll plug my brain
exactly.
into a computer when I'm 80, so I'm gonna live forever anyway.
He's the
What's the
kind of person who would do that. And I don't
Oh,
even know if it's
undoubtedly.
because, but I don't even know if he wants to live forever. Like, I don't even know if it would be out of a drive for immortality. Like, I don't know
No,
what would drive him to do this.
he
Maybe it is immortality. Maybe that's all he wants. Maybe he's
he
like, films live forever. I'm going
he
to live
reminds me
forever.
of Andy Warhol. in like Andy Warhol has that quote where he's like, I would totally much rather live as a machine. And I would feel, and Andy Warhol's like, I would love it if everyone on Earth was identical and the
Mhm.
same. You know, he has this kind of dream of like this homogeneous, nondescript, no uh interiority world of gray, you know, and he
Mhm.
thinks that's the most beautiful thing ever. And I feel like James kind of might vibe with that actually, except it would be blue, but everything's blue. But
That's right. Hey, it's a great color. He uses blue better than Michael Mann, and I will move on after saying that. To Ghosts of the
no
Abyss
comment.
2003.
Oh, this one I haven't seen.
Um, well, um, no, I don't care about it. It's just a documentary. Who
The real
cares?
next one.
But I mean, look at this gap. Um, from 97 Titanic to 2009
What could he have
Avatar.
been doing? What could he have been doing? Oh, I know. He was God is literally real on this planet. God has a physical presence on this planet. It's a planet that is a computer. The entire planet is a computer.
All
It's
right, Avatar, let me have it. I think it's a cold-blooded masterpiece, but I want to hear Isabel's takes on
oh
Avatar
my
because
god,
trust me,
it's
they're better than mine.
fascinating. It's fascinating. The planet is a fucking computer. That the beings on the planet fucking plug their brains into the planet and talk with God. And then they unplug and they plug into each other. And you can literally just change your body because fuck you. I can do what I want. Like it's utopian. It's insane. Everything about this movie is insane. It ends. I don't know who said this quote because the quote was I was made aware of it through a friend and he didn't cite the source, so I don't know where it came from. But the quote is something like, "You make a movie where the finale is you're just fucking massacring Marines, and viewers in like rural Kentucky are fist bumping and saying fuck yeah." You know,
Yeah.
like, and you make the most best-selling movie of all time about like killing the Marines as like an indigenous population being colonized, and James Cameron just kind of did that. Like it's a movie where like the Marines are working with a company to colonize a whole planet and enslave a sentient race, and that race rises up and kills all of them, and the planet unanimously said yay, and it made like $1 trillion. That's insane.
It's
That's
great.
fucking insane. It's
Yeah.
I don't understand it. It's like I forgive every other bullshit thing about this movie just on that merit. Like I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to start with this movie. It's insane.
Well, you have to start somewhere because I don't even have much to say about
It's
Avatar. I know that you
insane.
do. I think it's great. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's
It is.
lovely. What's it really about?
Nothing.
All right.
No,
Well,
I'm
that
kidding.
was our
It's
video about
it's James Cameron. So the movie came, since you said you didn't know this, it came from a dream. His mom had a dream about blue people or some shit. And
Fuck yeah, mom.
James Cameron had like a light bulb shaped like a money sign above his head. And he stroked his beard and said, hmm. And he started conceiving of this. And so that's again why I brought up like both he was thinking of both Alita and Strange Days at the exact time that Avatar came into being. So he was thinking about this movie about people who can transfer their consciousness or their memories between to other people, and this movie about a sentient robot who's more human than humans and picks the body that is perfect for her. And in the midst of that, he writes this movie about a man whose like body is like it's people have accused of being ableist. It might be. That's not my argument to make here or there,
Okay,
but like
fuck
it
that.
is.
Fuck that.
I can't make that argument one way or the other. But you know, it's a movie where like this man like he feels constricted by his body. He also feels constricted by his planet. So he simply chooses another one. He simply picks a new body. And this is obviously like the most problematic thing about the movie is like the cultural appropriation. It's really aggressively light. It's like his most
Yeah.
problematically thing. He didn't even really care about like being specific about it. You know, when he talks about it in interviews, he just says like, I kind of just picked from like five different Native American tribes and like kind of just rolled with it. He's not even consistent on that front. He doesn't even really give a shit. He
No,
just like,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it like that though is like the same kind of like Titanic love story thing. Like you
yeah,
have to connect with it, and like I know he doesn't care. Like I know he
he
doesn't actually care, but he knows
he's
exactly what to do.
he's so disinterested. I'm almost not offended, really.
That helps.
I'm
Yeah,
not the person who's going to be offended. So other
that does
people who
help
will
his
be
cause.
offended, that's to the people who are actually being offended to be offended.
And also the
Although,
amount of vitriol he treats with he's a great actor. He's in Public Enemies. Who's the villain of this?
oh, God, why can't I remember his goddamn name? I'm doing this all day today. Um, I'll look it up. Um, because he's
Sure,
really
he's the
good
guy
in
who
it.
shot Dillinger in Public Enemies, right?
Stephen Lang, yeah, Stephen Lang.
Yeah, Stephen Lang. Oh my God, he's so the amount of vitriol he treats that character almost forgives
It
every like offensible thing he did. Like
and again,
he
like this
knows
is
who
the
the
thing.
real enemy is. Like he knows who the real villain is of
Go back
history.
like 25 years, he was making aliens. The Marines were like this kind of ragtag group of like people that are
Hmm.
kind of weaponized as tools for like fascism, but they don't know it. And
Yeah.
they do have this like bond. The Avatar just says like, no, they're just straight the fuck up evil. Like I see the guy in charge of the Marines and I see literal Satan in this movie. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like
But you do see like borrowed. I think it's like a good like a culmination of James's work. Like a great like if you were to like Titanic's my favorite one, but if I was to show you something I think represents whatever James Cameron is,
it's the
it's
end point.
Avatar.
It
Because
makes
we see
so
so
much
many
sense.
recycled archetypes even. As I'm remembering Michelle Rodriguez doing like a great Vasquez, like doing a
Yeah,
great moment in Avatar, or even Giovanni Ribisi, one of my favorite actors, doing a Paul Reiser from Aliens, right? Like he's doing
yeah.
the same kind of thing. And of course Sigourney Weaver's in the fucking movie. Like it's
Plain
there,
Sigourney
everything's
Weaver,
there.
basically.
We even have like that feeling of mystery of a saccharine mystery of the abyss is like here, it's there, it's present. Of course, Terminator 2, we have this idea of like a group of people who are being punished by things that they have no control over, which is primarily technology and capitalism like forced upon this place. And of course, our most badass character is the Zoe Saldana
Yeah,
Navi, they're called, right?
yeah, Navi.
Yeah,
Uh,
like and she's incredible here. And Titanic, you get they're in love, okay? They're in love. And True Lies, yeah, there's problematic themes, but it's fine. It's
it's
fine. It all works. This is everything he's ever worked for.
this is so obviously the end point that it makes perfect sense. He's just devoting the rest of his life to making Avatar
Hmm.
sequels. Because what the fuck else could he do?
But what do you
He
think he's accomplishing with Avatar? Because
because
I agree. I think he's like, I'm done. This is it. So what is it? What is
it's
he at now? Like
it's that
literal
in
God, like created it?
it's it's in that Titanic, he said, I can resurrect a real historical tragedy that actually happened as a thrill ride, as a borderline pornographic thrill ride for you, my precious consumer. What else can I do? I'm going to make a planet.
Yep.
And he literally, the amount of detail, the opulence of the detail here is astounding. He hired like actual like botanists to figure out what the
Of
plants on
course.
this planet would be like based
You're sure
on the
two of them died while making it?
yeah, based on like the gravity parameters. Like he said, this is what the gravity is like on Avatar. How would an animal evolve in that gravity? And that's how they made the fucking banshees. And they tried to make the banshees like biologically accurate. So he gave them like main wings and sub wings and shows how those interact in a naturally evolved way. Like it's so stupid. It's like this is the
Shit
most
like that he's interested in though. Like it's so I remember when Titanic was released, some astronomer somewhere was like, "Oh, the stars are wrong. The stars didn't look like that." So James
yeah,
Cameron went out of his way to correct it.
it's
Like he
insane.
fixed the stars. He's God.
It's it's beyond insanity. It's the most hubris I've ever fucking seen in a movie by far, bar none.
For real, for real.
But I admire that. Like no one, I would argue like no one, like people like to say like Heaven's Gate or like Apocalypse Now, but I would really argue like no one has put that much hubris on the screen since like fucking like Birth of a Nation and Intolerance. Like it is.
He might actually remind me of like a Walt Disney type of figure. Like I wouldn't call Disney a filmmaker or a tycoon or even just a great capitalist. He was fascinated with a certain concept of immortality, but like the
Yeah.
idea that like he has so much sway or power over culture. And well, Walt Disney obviously had his own problematic beliefs, but they both believe that they're steering it in a correct course. So like what course is Avatar setting us in?
Mhm.
Like I kind of wish that James Cameron started to work in media in the 90s so that he could be making video games today, because I feel like
I
that would be,
agree. Although I
yeah,
feel
like
like
I feel like
Avatar is a video. There is an Avatar video game being made because he
there's
wants Avatar.
Pandora World here in Orlando down the
This
street.
this is what I mean. Like he's literally trying to create a fucking planet. He wants it to literally be real and have some kind of like mythic significance. He wants Pandora to be a thing that you can like actually study
yeah.
in some way. He wants it to be coherent enough to study.
So
He
what do you think he wants us to study about it? Like actually study the plant? Like, okay, but that's
I
boring. Like,
it's
what does
this
he
it
actually want us to
I
do?
think it honestly, I think it's literally as mundane as his goals for Titanic and the Abyss, which is like Titanic and the Abyss. He's like, Don't you find deep sea diving interesting?" And in Avatar, he says like, "Don't you find flora and fauna interesting? Why would you not find that interesting?"
I think
But
you're
beyond that,
probably right.
I think it's partly that, but I also think it's partly this kind of utopian vision of like what how we can evolve in the future. It's kind of slightly Excel-y, but like it's
You
like
think you're
how
painting me the image of like a god who is just interested in the most boring things
shit, the
possible.
most
And
boring
it's like,
shit imaginable.
yeah,
It's like the guy who's like fascinated by like model trains. So he builds the biggest model train in history. And he's like, "Don't you see how
right.
big it is?" And everyone's like, "But what do I do with it?" He's like, "What do you mean? What do you do with it? It's there.
Yeah,
Look at
that's
it.
exactly it. What a
It's literally
weirdo. He's so
he's literally saying
weird.
like, "I made a planet," and they're like, "What good is it?" And he's like, "What do you mean? Look at it." It's
You know
it's like
what,
that
then?
bore.
We should
It
refer to James Cameron as an architect. He's interested in
Yeah.
architecture.
Well,
He's
on that note, like there's a Borges short story about like a guy who's like commissioned to write a map of this area, and they say it needs to be absolutely accurate, the most accurate map ever. And so he recreates the entire mass of land down to the last grain of sand so that it's actually accurate
yeah.
and its actual scale so that it has every little scratch and every single rock. And so he just recreates it, and that's how he makes a perfect map. But it's like that with Avatar. Like he's trying to literally create this thing for no real reason other than because he knows he can, and because he knows there's nowhere else to go, I guess.
Yeah.
Because
I
his
mean,
work
he's
has
right. He's right.
it's been this constant escalation where like he never really kind of goes back. The only time I feel like he went backwards at any point, and I don't say that as a detriment, I just say it was like thematically, like he stepped down on the ladder back to somewhere he had gone before just to do it a little bit better, was Terminator 2. Because with the Abyss, you see him go into more of this conceptual territory, and he says, "I'm going to take a step back and make like a real movie." And then
Mhm.
he's like, "All right, I made a real movie. I'm going to go back to doing like weird shit with Titanic." And this is like the next step up from that, where it's like he had to make fucking Avatar. Of course he made Avatar. And of course he's still making Avatar. He's always making Avatar. He's
He's
always
gonna make
been
it till he
making
dies.
Avatar.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's an incredibly problematic text. Like I feel like I don't even have to point that out. Like it's so fucking art. Like it's a movie about how like it's basically a work of like anthropology made by like a rich white guy who no one can tell no. You
Sounds
know,
like one
it's
of those, like you click on a YouTube video of like a guy who's dead now, but he had schizophrenia and a very public image online, and like you could read like tomes of these fake things that he like. It's like that. It's that level of
yeah.
obsession and patience and attention to detail.
And also I would
And
say like total disregard to whether it's authentic work or not. Because again, like he is basically like colonizing a fake race by making this. Like he
What?
is colonizing a fake, not only is he making a fake planet, he's colonizing that planet. Not like the rich white guy has come from like colonizing real people on Earth to being like, well, I guess I just gotta create new people to colonize. So like I can't even trust his depiction of the Na'vi because it's filtered through James Cameron, like it's so
You're
bullshit.
falling into it. You're doing it. You're
It's
treating the
a
Navi
it's a
with
rabbit hole.
dignity.
He's like, it's a rabbit hole. Like I can't even trust it as an authentic work of like fictional constructed ethnography because
I
it's
don't
the
even,
most like
I think you're right. Like what it's supposed to be is this not even project because like a project involves like, I mean, he will be constantly tinkering with it, but it's a fully functional planet with a fully functional people who have a mythos and a history to them. Like he
but
did it. He created that world. He
and
did
then we
it.
have to say, can we even trust his depiction of that? Because in the end, the hero
Yeah.
of the movie is the white guy who becomes transracial, starts
Well, what do you
adopting
think? Like when
he
James
starts
Cameron watches a movie, what do you think he's doing? Like, how do you think
I
he
don't think he
watches a
watches
movie?
movies. I
Me
don't think he
neither, though. But like,
I
I'm
don't
just trying to figure out like
But
why.
like, well, like at the end of the movie, like Jake Sully literally adopts their slurs. He calls humans sky people. And it's like, bro, you're from like Baltimore or something, man. Like, what are you talking about? And like he
I mean, okay, if Kate Winslet can shed her bourgeois skin, then so can
yeah,
Scott.
it's
Wait,
it's
what's his
it's
name?
Jake Sully.
Jake
It's
Sully.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people would be liable to think that the movie is Cameron trying to make the case that someone like him with enough effort and enough like inward thinking
The
could
audio's a
shed
little weird.
themselves. Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yep, much better.
I feel like a lot of people, their initial reaction to the movie might be to say that James Cameron thinks that with enough time, enough work, enough introspection, enough self-criticism, the white man can shed himself of his historical, guilt. I don't think he gives a fuck.
No, I don't.
He doesn't give a fuck. I
And
think the movie kind of leans into
dude,
that reading, to be fair, so I get it. But like, I
and
don't think he cares about his white guilt. I don't think he has white guilt. I think he
also,
just
what
kind
is
of lives.
something that like filmmakers do? The most egotistical filmmakers on the planet always do self-insertions. I'm looking at this list of films, and I don't know outside of Bill Paxton and Titanic if he's ever inserted himself into a film
the
ever.
the closest I feel like again an uncharitable reading or
No,
someone
it's not
like
Arnie in True Lies. It's
oh,
not.
I was gonna say Bill Paxton in True Lies as the used car salesman selling you bullshit, but I'm like, I don't think he's self-deprecating enough.
No, I don't.
That's
So
something
like
another artist
but
would
that
do, but
implies that he creates these worlds and he's not involved in the fiction,
yeah, exactly. It's this,
which is
you see why
wild.
I'm like, you see why I'm obsessed with this movie. It's so like again, like the finale of the movie is the indigenous population rises up and slaughters the fucking Marines. And then I don't even know like if he's in that invested in that angle, which is weird because no one else would go that far, but he doesn't even seem to give a shit. It's like, and although it's worth knowing that like my friend that like my friend who loves this movie more than anyone I know isn't even fucking American, And he's like, my friend who always says I hate America loves this movie and thinks it's the greatest movie ever made. Um, and so like I feel like that says something, but I don't know. It's so interesting. It's like it's effective as a political text, but I don't, it's imperfect, but it's mostly effective. But I also don't think that really gets at what it's like if someone, if someone say like as a thought experiment, say someone in a universe where the Bible was never written wrote the Bible and then said, now that that's out of the way and I founded Christianity, we can get to the shit I really care about.
Exactly, right?
It's like
Right? That's why, like, you're the only one who gets me when it comes to Cameron. Like, I bring up James Cameron to people, or to other YouTubers even, and it's like, oh, really? That's so simple. And it's like, but it's not. Or maybe it's too simple, and
and
that's the problem.
the
Like,
other thing as far as simplicity, like when it comes to Avatar, like it's like the way it's shot is so serviceable. It's so like there's no shots in the movie that I'm like, oh, what a shot. what a sequence. I'm just like, it's perfectly
It's one
like
of the most
serviceable.
fascinating things. I don't even know if I could call these films one of the most fascinating things ever accomplished by someone who makes films.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing worth studying in its like editing or montage or like shot composition or even there's nothing worth studying there. It just
Just
does what it's supposed to do in the same way Terminator 2
it's like
did.
an unremarkable man did a truly remarkable thing for unimportant reasons. Like I don't know why he did these things, but it's incredible.
He's been working on this as long as I've been alive. He literally conceived of this movie when I around the time I was born, probably before I was born, and he's still working on it. Avatar 2 is not even fucking out yet. We have Avatar 2, guess what? We're going back underwater. Did you miss being underwater? We're going back underwater. And from the trailer, there is vehicle underwater submerged like vehicles that do sink in Avatar 2.
Which definitely just mean that he now just mapped out the oceans. Like it's just gonna be a thing. It's just gonna be a boring thing, but
And there's
masked
four
in like
more
the
after
most
that.
devastating battle. Yeah. I'm looking at his filmography here, and it's just
Sigourney
Avatar.
Weaver is coming back in Avatar 2 to play a new character who's like 60 years younger than she is.
What is he trying? Okay, we know what he's trying to accomplish. It's just so absurd and bombastic and mundane.
It's
Ultimately,
I
like you
don't know.
created, okay, you did it. What am I supposed to do with it though? But the audience, the public, they prove him right every time, and he might
You,
take the. Go on.
everyone always doubts him. They looked at Titanic and they were like, this is gonna bomb. Mo became the richest man on earth. Then he was like, I'm gonna sell you, you fucking Americans, a movie about blue aliens, blue monkey cat aliens who have sex with their tails and kill Marines. And everyone said, well, obviously and I'm releasing it in January. And everyone
Oh
said, well,
yeah.
and everyone's like, oh, well, obviously it's gonna bomb. Makes more money than anyone in history has ever made. And then
Yeah.
he's making Avatar 2 13 years later when like the movie's become a meme that people are like, oh, there's no way it's gonna, no one even cares about Avatar in 2022. I'm sure it's gonna make even more money than
Oh yeah, I'll
Avatar
be
did.
there opening night, if not the midnight show. Like I'll be there.
Everyone makes jokes about like, like people in red letter media and shit like make jokes about how like Avatar has left no mark on pop culture, but evidently it has because we keep talking about it. We
Yeah.
keep People keep talking about how it's left no mark on pop culture, which it seems to me like it left a mark on pop culture because we keep talking about it. And we keep talking about how there's no way it's going to make money, which makes me think it's probably going to make money because we keep talking about it. It's it's so ridiculous.
But I feel like James takes really weird lessons from how great the public responds. He's like, "Oh, so they love underwater diving. See, I knew it. I knew they did." So-
he 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 is literally physically incapable of not making money. It's like he he could re-release, he could say I'm remaking Solo or the 120 days of Solo or Sodom in 120 frame rate 3D, and I'm going to fill the theater with the smell of shit, and it will make $1 billion day one.
Yeah, I
Like
think that's why something like The Abyss is viewed as unique because it like broke even. I think it's his
yeah.
like worst performing film, and it's still successful.
And this is
You know,
also again why like I say that he does Spielberg better than Spielberg in that like he's just selling you his own personal nostalgic interests and makes
Spielberg's
like
biggest flaw is that he wants to be a filmmaker. Okay, James Cameron wants to be God.
I
And
guess
wait, how about no, better than this? He became it. I mean, he did
no,
it.
this is what it is. This is what it is. It's that Steven Spielberg is a neoliberal like uber capitalist who wants to be an artist.
Yeah.
James
Okay,
Cameron
tell me
is
about the
an
moral framework of James Cameron. Like
well,
it's
I was gonna say
there.
James Cameron is an artist who just wants to be a neoliberal uber capitalist. He's like,
He's a
he's a
designer. Like,
guy
I don't know what he designs culture. I'll call him a designer for sure.
he is a talented natural born artist who just doesn't want to be a fucking artist, but he can't stop because he's just too damn good at it. Spielberg is like it's his Sisyphean effort to become an artist,
I
which in
think
its
you
own way
nailed it.
makes him an artist, of course, because
It's
I
like
think
a
he's
guy who's really in the model train, so he builds the biggest train ever invented. It's just like,
it's
isn't
a
it
guy who
wonderful?
only ever wanted to build skyscrapers, but accidentally got into the business of making trains. And he makes the biggest, fastest, bestest trains on earth that change the nature of like industry in America. But all he can think about is how he just wants to make a building. And he just keeps making these goddamn trains and he can't stop doing it. I feel like you could write a book about just the psychology of Cameron and the end of it would get nowhere.
No, exactly. I mean, that was the thing with wanting to do a James Cameron discussion, in that like no one ever talks about Cameron like this. No one interacts with his art. I think they act with it correctly, meaning they do what James Cameron wants them to do, but they don't actually get to the core of like what James Cameron is. So I don't even know if he's
The
a fucking
mystery,
person.
the eternal mystery of Cameron. I will never
That's the
know
title
who
of the
he
video,
is.
The Eternal Mystery
The
of James
mystery of James
Cameron.
Cameron. You have to say Jim Cameron. It's my favorite
No,
thing.
no, I'll just war with SEO as long as I exist.
You realize if we had the two people on here like we were originally talking about, this would have been like 3 times as long. So anyway, as for our epilogue, Alita Battle Angel.
We'd still be on fucking aliens. Like, it'd still be there.
Yeah. Uh Alita's good. Anyway, this is all, by the way, ignoring the trans reading of James Cameron. But
What is
I'll
the
leave that.
trans reading? What is it?
Avatar is literally about how he's like, I got a new body. I plug my brain in, give me a new body. I feel euphoric now.
See, we did it.
I have better sex now. I have everything. Alita Battle Angel. Everyone tells her not to pick that body, so she picks it anyway. She goes through this arduous process and almost gets herself killed to pick the right body. And then she becomes superhuman and
Yep.
amazing and like a fucking ninja because of it. It's amazing. I do think
Then,
there
I
is like
mean,
a consistent incidental trans reading of Avatar.
the villain of T2 just shapeshifts between genders. In fact, is a gender, probably.
Yeah. My favorite gay icon, the T800. But
I mean, honestly, don't fuck around with it.
if anyone gets to the end of this, they're going to
I,
see like
if the other two people who we invited like came, and by the way, I just didn't feel like having them on, but because it's already so long. But I like that I initially pitched this idea as a brief general discussion just about James Cameron as a whole. I didn't know I was going to go through every film he made. I thought I was just going to jump like
I knew this was gonna happen. I
I
knew.
didn't. I only rewatched like one of them. But they hit so hard. Avatar is, I think, a brilliant film. Do you think that James Cameron is erotically attracted to Zoe Saldana as a Navi?
No. I think he's erotically drawn to the idea of Jake Sully plugging in and becoming an avatar. I think the most erotic scene in that movie is the scene where Jake first wakes up in his avatar body and he feels his legs for the first time in years. I
Yeah,
think
true.
that is the most erotic scene in the movie because like he loves it. He loves it. All those scenes of
Right.
them like, or the parts where it is gonna come off weird, but where he's like plugging his brain into like a fucking animal or
Um,
into the
no. Okay, no, it's just me then. I had the weird blue lady
I mean, I think
attraction.
it's the Titanic thing again, where he knew he's like, oh, every guy in this audience is gonna want to fuck a blue cat.
And your
But
cold boyfriend was like, I'm here for it. Let's do it.
but yeah, again, I touched on this at the beginning also, but yeah, again, this is like the also the logical endpoint insofar as like I keep saying insofar, I don't know why. It's the logical endpoint in that like for James Cameron, who, you know, in Terminator 2, the machine could be a father. The machine could be a
Yes.
better father than your father. In like uh, I guess like Strange Days, this sort of what seems like a frivolous, technological advancement can that's used for like entertainment can change the entire like landscape of a country. Like it changed like the structure of a country. Um, the natural endpoint I feel like to that is that the planet is now a computer, you know, which
Yeah, and it
is
could be a better planet for you than the real
yeah,
one.
it's a very like accelerationist vision, it's that kind of like,
Oh,
especially
do you
because
think
like
he is? Do you think he's an accelerationist?
vaguely, maybe not as much as
I
or
think
as consciously
vaguely.
as Christopher Nolan.
I think that like he thinks it's yeah, I think he's an accelerationist. Yeah, I think it's unavoidable. It's in our nature to destroy each other. It's been there since the beginning.
No, not in that sense, but like partly in that sense, but like acceleration in the sense that like capitalism is like an invisible artificial intelligence
But I
that
don't
is
think he hates
barreling toward
capitalism.
that is barreling us towards the point where humanity will become a no, he's more like the Nick Land, where he's like, no, capitalism is an AI, in the future the human race will be eugenics and like everyone will be gone and the only living things will be computers. This is a good thing. This that's
Yes,
James Cameron is like he's
which
like
is such a 180 from Terminator 1.
yeah. Yeah, just by inherently, given that the premise of Terminator
So
is the exact
it's
opposite.
impossible to tell when he's being genuine or when he's being cinematic because think I don't think he is genuine when he's cinematic, I guess.
I don't know.
I don't know
I
either.
don't
What
know.
have we learned from this
That
about
in the
James
future,
Cameron?
the planet will be a computer. You can plug your brain into God. It's
That's what we've learned.
give
I
me
mean,
the
I'm
fucking Sufi Muslim reading of Avatar. I need it. Like I
for
need
real.
it. I need it. I need like
Good
the
God. I have no idea. Like, I think we've made progress. If nothing else, then we've definitely made the people watching this video who thought they knew James Cameron realize that they definitely don't. And like James Cameron might frighten them. He frightens
yeah,
me.
it again to one last time because I'm insufferable, lean onto the like the Spielberg Cameron dichotomy. Spielberg is all psychology. Every film of his is just a reflection of his mind, of his psyche. He doesn't know how to create art that isn't like subconscious in some way, and that reflects like the way he edits, the way he composes shots, the way he
Mhm.
constructs set pieces. James Cameron is purely like data. Like
Yes, he is. I was about to
James
say, like,
Cameron,
Steven Spielberg is more like he gives into his carnal desires like through cinema, through the most contrived way possible. James Cameron is so guarded, like you said, he's like data. Just
yeah,
I
it's
don't know. I mean I think Linda Hamilton turns him on, but that's all I got.
she did for a while. He married her and then they
Oh yeah,
divorced.
see? I mean, and you can tell by the way he filmed her in T2. But like God, he never gives in to he's so guarded. What is at the core of Cameron? Because like he told one of the greatest love stories we have in film, or at least one of the most beloved
I,
ones, and none of his experience is in there. There's affection, but none of his experience is there.
I think the core of his work is a love affair. It's the love affair of James Cameron and his little toy submarine he had as a boy.
Right?
that
Oh my
that that
God.
is that is the rosebud of James Cameron. That is his rosebud. It's just about James Cameron and technology and pushing it to the limit like he's fucking Tony Hawk, seeing how far he can take it. You know what I mean? Like
Tony
he-
Hawk.
he's like
Tony
how
Hawk loves skateboarding, I promise.
he's like, how far can I take it? Like in a push it to the human limit sense, except it's in a push it to the technical limit, you
Well, yeah,
know?
I mean, James Cameron's the kind of guy who deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award, but not from a film academy. Like, I don't like he's had so much effect on the general public, on culture, on media. I don't know what he thinks he is. Probably just a designer or an architect.
Yeah.
And just sounds belittling. I mean, like you said, he built an entire planet and race of people and then colonized them. Like
It's the fucking audacity.
the audacity. No, for real. I think we're gonna wrap up this video here, but
I feel like there's
uh,
nowhere else to go until Avatar 2 comes out.
yeah, so
And then
stay tuned for
Avatar
that
3,
3 hour
and then
long
Avatar
Avatar.
4, and then Avatar 5.
But we're gonna end up talking about like water levels, and I don't know, like it's gonna be
We
boring.
I screamed at the beginning of an Avatar tangent about God, and that is one fifth of the envisioned project.
I love that I asked you what we learned from this, and you said that God is a computer.
Computer. He's a Spinozist all along. It's
And that was the clearest answer possible. Cameron is a fucking he's
he's
a
a
madman.
philosopher.
He is, but without a philosophy. Like I don't know what he actually believes and
He's
what he's
the
just.
first since Michael Snow, who he reminds me of a bit actually, but Avatar is his wavelength.
Oh, I
But
will be there for the way of water. I'll be there for it.
I'm gonna be in
Um,
Avatar in theaters next month.
oh yeah, I will be too.
And
Hell
then
yeah.
Titanic in February is coming back. 60
James Cameron
FPS.
single-handedly keeping movie theaters afloat right
60
now.
FPS 3D Titanic that coming this February.
Yeah. Oh, he even had like Avatar taken off of Disney Plus because he's like, no, it's
He
going to theaters.
he also has plans to do 3D without glasses. He doesn't know how he's going to do it. It's just like his current project is like, I want to do it. Like, that's the dream, is like, I want to create a movie where it's 3D without glasses.
Like, and I'm
He
sure it's
has,
for the
I don't think
most
he's done
boring
it yet.
reason possible. It's so you could clearly see
The fucking
a
fauna.
plant. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, good
We gotta
God.
stop. We gotta stop. I'm
All right,
so
thank you.
hungry.
Thank you for watching this, you guys. Say goodbye, Isabel.
Bye.